Understanding business process management in ERP implementations and the future of digital transformation. Those are just two of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 161 of Transformation Ground Control.
This is Transformation Ground Control, your source for all things business, technology, strategy, and change. If you're growing your business, leading change within your organization, or undertaking any sort of operational or technology change initiative, this podcast is for you. This show covers what you need to know about digital transformation, organizational change, operational improvement, and business growth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. We have offices in the US, Europe, and Asia Pacific, and we help clients with their digital strategy, software selection, and implementation initiatives of all different types of ERP and technology initiatives. The show is sponsored by Major Tom Productions, and this podcast is everything you need to know about digital transformation. We cover strategy, people, process change, and everything in between for everything you need to know about digital transformations. And you can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. So I'm excited for today's episode. We've got a lot to cover. We're going to get into some questions from the audience, and then we've got two really lengthy, I'd say, or meaty conversations that we're going to have. One is we're going to have our first guest on the show with Vossen from a company called Mavim Software. He's the CEO of Mavim Software, which is a business process management software solution. He's going to be on the show talking about the nuances we need to understand for business process management in ERP implementations. And then later in the show, we are going to talk about the future of digital transformation. It's actually a keynote presentation that I gave recently in Europe as a workshop we hosted in Western Europe not too long ago. And I want to play you that clip from a workshop that we hosted there. And speaking of Europe, that's where I'm recording from here today. I'm in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and actually my host or my guest that's going to be joining us here today is also with me in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I'll bring him on the show here after our Q&A session here to start. And speaking of getting started, we want to jump into some questions here today from the audience. We always pull questions that you all submit on not only on this podcast, but also on our YouTube channels, our LinkedIn channels, and even Facebook. So wherever you listen or watch to this podcast, or if you're following me or Third Stage Consulting on any of our platforms, you can submit questions, just whatever is on your mind. And I'm happy to get to those questions every week on this episode. So we're going to get to a few of those questions here today. And you'll want to stay tuned for this entire episode or this entire segment, because I do get roasted at least once in some of the questions here. So be sure to stick around for that we're going to jump into right now. And then later we'll bring on our guest, Vossen, to talk about business process management. So to start, the first question we have from our audience is from YouTube. And this is from someone named Clarence on YouTube. And this is a comment about SAP versus Oracle. So I have a video on my YouTube channel that I recently published within the last few weeks that dives into the comparison between SAP S/4HANA and Oracle Fusion. And his comment here is, this is still old and not reflecting current Fusion versus SAP S/4HANA. Fusion is open and scalable platform that allows enterprise to grow without technical limits. Fusion provides software updates every 90 days, eliminating technical hindrance for innovation and patching vulnerability. Oracle only charges one subscription fee for you according to your scope of implementation. No charge for resizing after implementation. And I think Clarence brings up some good points about the evolution of Oracle's pricing and their infrastructure and just the updates and how they manage their cloud environments. But my video focuses more on functional fit, and it focuses on how well software does or doesn't fit for different business functions. I actually don't really get into a lot of the technicalities of which is the better hosting provider or the better cloud hosting provider, which one has better technical sizing, things of that nature. I view both SAP and Oracle as fairly comparable on that front. So I really try to focus on the differences between the two solutions, and much of the differences are a bit functional. So we talk a lot about some of the gaps in S/4HANA and some of the gaps in Oracle Fusion. And of course, I talk about the strengths in the video of both solutions. So I invite you to watch that video if you'd like on my YouTube channel. You can watch the 10 or 12-minute video that it is to get my take on how I think Oracle Fusion and SAP S/4HANA compare. But what I'll say here is that while these are good points, I think it's missing the real important differentiators between the two solutions. And just like is the case with most ERP comparisons that we do for our clients, it usually doesn't come down to technical infrastructure or technical sizing. It comes down to functional fit and how well it aligns with the business. So that's where I'd leave that comment. I don't want to be dismissive of the comment, but I do want to say that I generally don't consider those things as key differentiators between the different solutions. So thank you for the feedback there. Also, I had a question here this one is from YouTube as well. And the question was on one of my supply chain related videos. And someone had a really good question that I've never really addressed on this podcast or in any of my videos from what I recall. But one of the comment here is, what is the difference between a supply chain manager and a logistics manager? Which is an interesting question and a real good one. And the way I'd summarize it is logistics manager is usually someone who is managing the logistics part of the supply chain. And logistics is typically one of several different components of a supply chain. So you have, for example, warehouse management. In addition to logistics, you have warehouse management, you have procurement, you have other functions that constitute or comprise a supply chain management function. So logistics is really the work that goes behind managing how you move products around. How do you get the trucks where they need to be to get the inventory onto the truck? How do you schedule the trucks, route the trucks, make sure you're optimizing your fleets? All that stuff. It's basically optimizing how you move stuff between warehouses or distribution centers or manufacturing facilities. Whereas a supply chain manager manages the entire supply chain. It's everything from planning, procurement, all the way through and including logistics, warehouse management, et cetera. So that's kind of the main differentiator I'd point out, that I think logistics is a subset of supply chain management. And oftentimes supply chain managers start off being logistics managers and then they move up to supply chain manager, at least within the larger organizations with more robust supply chain functions anyway. So great question there. And I appreciate that. I might one day make a video that compares the two just because it is such a good question there. Here's another, in addition to the Oracle versus SAP video, that was, I would say, a slight roast, maybe just more of a disagreement with my opinion. This one is just a flat out roast, but I'm going to bring it up anyway because there are actually some good points embedded in this, and it's always fun to poke fun at myself anyway. This is from YouTube as well, and the comment here is on a video related to, I'm trying to pull up which video it's related to, and I don't have that in front of me, but it was one of my YouTube videos, and in that video, I talk about ERP implementation lawsuits. That's what it was. So I'm talking about lessons from ERP related lawsuits. And that's another recent video I published on my channel. And in the comments, I found this comment from Brent on YouTube. Brent says, how are you going to sell a $3 million or $5 million project without making some ambitious claims? It's clear that Eric has been more of a paper pusher or a theoretical guy you bring in when the real drivers fail in these large organizations. So interesting concept. I won't take it personally there, but it sounds like he's saying that the real people that do the real work end up failing, and then a theoretical paper pusher type of person like me would come in and try to fix or solve the project. I guess what I'd say is, regardless of whether or not I agree with whether I'm a paper pusher or not, or theoretical or hands-on or not, that's probably not as relevant as I would just look at where the effectiveness is. To me, it doesn't matter if it's a paper pusher, someone doing the quote unquote real work, or someone that's academic. Anyone that can help make sure your project is successful is what I would look for on your project, whether someone internally or external. And I think it's a good point because you do want to have people that understand the big picture, but you also want people that have hands-on experience. Now, of course, I would argue that our team certainly has a lot of hands-on experience. I do agree that I don't have as much hands-on experience in recent years because I'm managing a larger organization now than I was earlier in my career when I was actually doing more of the hands-on consulting. But having said that, I touch a lot more projects as well because of the size of our team and the scale and scope of our project. So, I think the key is to have a combination of people that have that big picture understanding, but of course you still need the people that are boots on the ground, they can do the hands-on work, and that is not me. So I agree with this person in that concept, and maybe that does come through in some of my videos. So it actually is a good point. I think you have to have a lot of different skills on a project. And I think that's the key takeaway here from this question, which is a good one. So thank you for that, Brent. And then here's an interesting comment related to business requirements. And it's a question that is from YouTube, another one that I hadn't really thought a lot about, but I always learn a lot by reading these questions. That's why I like going through all the comments and questions on my various social media platforms. I actually read them all. I may not always respond to them, but I do read them all. And they're very informative for me. So I appreciate everyone that does comment. And this was actually a comment related to episode number 158, I believe it was, of our podcast on YouTube, of this podcast on YouTube. And in it, this person says, after many years in consultancy, my question is why a retired school teacher cannot collect requirements. It all requires age maturity where one can control emotions. I agree with the economist of the book Big Con, where Big Four are making government officials immobile and look like an infant. Big consultants, what they do is create as is and to be and make big money. Technical consultants are almost beaten to deliver the project with less time and low pay. So interesting comment. First of all, I'd never heard of the book called The Big Con, and I actually looked it up after seeing this comment because I was fascinated by it. Anytime someone tries to expose an industry or call out the weaknesses or deficiencies of any industry, I like reading that stuff because I like understanding those risks and just sort of what the dark side is that we don't always talk about out in the open. I've not yet read the book, but I'm intrigued by it, and I've actually ordered the book to read it. So it's called The Big Con, and it's the author's first name is Maria, and I think her last name is Italian. I think it starts with an M, and I apologize, I don't have that in front of me. But if you look on Amazon or any bookstore, just look up The Big Con, and if you need to put Maria in there, she should come up. That book should come up. And I'm actually trying to get her to be on this podcast, by the way. I'm not getting a response yet, but I've invited her to be on this podcast because I'd love to chat with her about the book. But I think it brings up a really interesting point. And it's something I'd like to dive into in more detail in future YouTube videos and just my own observations and studies, is really understanding when and where do consultants add the most value and when and where do consultants actually diminish value. And I think both are probably happening. I think especially with these large consulting firms, there are pockets of value that you can get from a consulting firm, but I think there is a ton of wasted value, a ton of wasted money that goes to these consulting firms that oftentimes will leave a company or an organization in worse shape than it was before they hired the consultancy. But because it's a big brand name that's well recognized, people have a certain amount of trust, and there's a certain amount of cachet that goes along with those software solutions, or those not the software solutions, but the consulting firms. I think a lot of times people are misled, or they mistakenly believe that they can trust those organizations to look out for their best interests. And I think the real key here to think about is some of these large organizations, these large consulting firms, have hundreds of thousands of employees. Literally, they've got 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 employees, which is huge. I mean, absolutely massive organizations, bigger than a lot, if not most, government organizations. And so just to set it aside for a moment, so we won't get into this, but it does make you wonder. It makes me wonder, is that too big? Is that just too big of an organization that's too inefficient, too much of a machine that doesn't necessarily have clients' best interests in mind? That's a whole nother debate for another time. But what I think it does too is it exposes, or it sort of gives you the magnitude of scale that these organizations have. And in order for a big consulting firm that's that big to make anything worth their time, first of all, it's got to be a multi-million-dollar contract. In other words, they're not going to go pursue, $50 or $100 or even $500,000 engagements if they don't think there's some sort of multi-million or multi-tens or hundreds of $1 million of potential on top of it. So that's one thing. But if you're a large organization and you fall into that category where you are going to spend millions or tens of millions of dollars on consulting services, then you have to wonder, well, how are you going to ensure that a $10 million project doesn't turn into 15 or 20 or $30 million? And that's what consulting firms, these big consulting firms, are really good at, is turning a really small project, a small implementation, into something that's much bigger, oftentimes through change orders, through increasing scope, through changing assumptions, and flat out lowballing the initial implementation estimates. So this comes back to a point that I always make in my videos and on this podcast too, is that organizations need to take control of their projects. I think we have this unhealthy learned helplessness that organizations tend to have with consulting firms, especially the big ones, where they think they're a massive consulting firm. They've got tons of resources. They're much smarter than me, and they know technology and implementations much more than me. That may or may not be true, but even if it is true, it doesn't mean that you need as many resources and as much of a price tag as what these organizations are paying. And oftentimes it reminds me a little bit of The Wizard of Oz, the movie The Wizard of Oz, where Oz is behind the curtain and he doesn't want anyone to look behind the curtain to see what's really happening and how he's creating the wizard. And when you pull back the curtain, you realize it's just some, just some insecure little man that's actually creating this big angry wizard. And so it's sort of like the same thing, or that's a metaphor for big consulting firms where they act like there's a lot of magic happening behind the curtain. You, the client, can't see it. This is our thing. We own this project. We own the expertise, and we're going to run with this. And it turns what is meant to be a complementary partnership between client and customer, or client and consulting firm, and turns it into more of an adversarial, conflicting self-interest sort of a scenario. So super fascinated by that dynamic. I think it's super unhealthy, and I think it's something that big organizations especially need to be aware of. Smaller organizations too, if you happen to hire a consulting firm that's a lot bigger than you, no matter what size you are, if you're hiring a consulting firm that's a lot bigger than you, you just have to make sure you find a way to level the playing field through project governance, controls, ownership, and that sort of thing, and make sure that you own your transformation, that you're making business decisions and financial decisions that are best for you and your organization, and deliver the most business value and mitigate the risk as much as you can. So, and of course, how you do that is something that's been a topic of this podcast in the past, and in my YouTube channel as well. So stay tuned, or keep watching our stuff, and you'll see a lot of threads that comment or provide some insights on how to address that dynamic in the industry. So great questions from the audience, though. Thank you for all the really good questions. I appreciate it. They're good as always, and I always like having a healthy, spirited debate in response to some of these comments as well. So we're going to shift gears here in just a moment and bring on my guest here, who's going to join me right here in person in just a moment. His name is JJ Vossen. He is the CEO of a company called Mavim Software, which creates and delivers business process management software. And he's going to be on the show talking with me about business process management, how it fits into ERP implementations, as well as just any digital business technology initiative, or any business transformation for that matter too. There's a lot of what we'll talk about that's completely tech agnostic, as well as just transformation agnostic. Any sort of change initiative, business process management is typically going to be a big part of that. So we're going to talk about some of the misunderstandings in the space, try to clarify what BPM is, and talk about how you can factor that into your ERP implementation or digital transformation. So we're going to bring him on here in just a moment, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. We have offices in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And you can learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. And we do everything from digital strategy, software selection, through and including implementation planning and phase zero work, as well as implementation itself, including the program management, organizational change, and business process management, which is the topic that we're going to cover here next with our guest. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Be sure to check that out. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. So thank you for being here today. Excited for our next guest. He's never been on this show before. We've talked about this topic before, but never with as much of a thought leader in the space as this person, and excited to have him here. I'm excited to be with him here in person, actually. So he's joining me here just to my left, your right, and we're here live at his office. Actually, I'm producing this podcast from his office in the Netherlands, just outside of Amsterdam. So with that all being said, JJ, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Eric. So yes, welcome everybody. My name is, so officially name is Jean-Jacques Vossen, so JJ for people that call me short. I'm the CEO of a very nice Dutch headquartered company called Mavim. Mavim for US people and international people. Headquartered in the Netherlands, typical software company. So we have a huge manufacturing site, software development site in India, and global presence across the globe. And of course, for the US people, also a very nice team in the US selling and maintaining our software.
Great.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Thank you to the audience for being here. And we're going to get into a lot of stuff related to business process management. Can you tell us a little bit more about Mavim and just what the product does, just so maybe to give us an understanding of how you come at understanding the business process management world?
Yeah. So again, for those that are joining and are let's say the art of process managers, process management is of course not new.
Right.
So it's of course, if we're really honest, it's maybe even that people say, "Oh my God, not process manager again? Are you for real?" But the good news is now that people start to realize that process management, business process management, is getting more and more important, because it's all about, if you are in a digital transformation, it's all about people. It's all about the people in a process working together, and of course supported by IT technology. And the three of that together, you need to make sure that you then can continue and improve the performance of your organization. The process management part is getting more and more important because people do realize, if I'm not designing my future state I want, how can I improve? So process management is, by certain companies claimed, it's reimagined, or it's reinvented, or it's back on the board. Because
Right.
there are some companies that really brought it back into the board level.
Right.
So
yeah, and I want to ask you a bunch of questions here today about how business process management works and some of the lessons you have from working with your customer base on your business process management platform with Mavim. But I want to ask the audience a quick question as we get started here. I'm just curious to hear, just to get a pulse from the audience on when you think business process management should start in a digital transformation. I'd love to see in the chat what you think, as far as either what you think should be as far as when business process management should start, or what you're doing with your current digital transformation. When are you starting business process management and how are you approaching it? And we're going to get into that here in just a moment, but I want to hear the audience's feedback first. So I guess just to start, I think we're both in agreement that business process management is very important to digital transformation. Why do you think it is that so many organizations overlook business process management or don't invest enough time and money in it?
the honest answer is that people do understand that they want to improve the performance of their organization. They do understand that the current way of working needs improvement. And then what they do normally is they check in what's going on in the world. They check in also in peers in their organization. And then they get advised by, for argument's sakes, by software vendors that say, look, I have a best practice. I can help you. Don't you worry. This is my partner in crime that will run this digital transformation engagement avant la lettre, but then and template based. So they are in a urge. So they think they are in a hurry. They want to re-platform, and they trust the software vendor and they trust the implementation partner. In their view, rightly so.
Right.
And then certain things happen.
Yes. And let's talk about the certain things. There's certain, let's call it economic self-interest that creates conflicts. And when I say economic self-interest, I'm not talking about the company that's implementing. I'm talking about software vendors and system integrators and their economic self-interest. How do their self-interest conflict with the necessity to do business process management the right way?
Yeah, so then, so of course, and I do understand the software vendors have targets. The software vendors have to make targets. They want to make targets, and it's in their interest that the implementation goes as fast as possible. That's also the same interest of the customers. We all want it to happen fast. The problem is, if you don't know what you want to achieve with your organization, that's what you need to do first. Because your software vendor wants to implement very fast the software. The software vendor has no domain interest and has no clue. What do you want to achieve with your organization? So there's the misalignment that a best practice of an implementation of a software package. The software is so highly configurable nowadays. You can do anything with the software. That's a good news. But you need to be very sure what you want to achieve with that process in my organization, with my people, with my customers, with my competition.
Right.
And not what the vendor thinks that you want to do. So you should own your own destiny.
Right.
And there's the conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a problem that's probably becoming more and more prevalent, in at least from what I've seen, just because you have so many on-premise legacy systems that are being sunset right around the same time. I mean, Microsoft and SAP and some of these other big software vendors are sunsetting their old products, which is understandable. That's part of lifecycle management for any solution. But the movement to the cloud is all happening in parallel with all these different vendors. So you have a bunch of different vendors telling the same thing, which is you need to switch now.
Yeah.
You need to go through this implementation now.
Yeah. And
if you have a deadline of, say, 2 years from now, you may think to yourself, well, I don't have time to do business process management. I need to just get on a new system.
There you go.
And that's what you're saying that's a flawed way to approach.
Yeah. So again, what we have with our customer base. So we have a proven track record with the following scenario. we have example customers that said, okay, yes, we are in a hurry. If you can commit, Mr. Software Vendor, that in 1.5 years you can do our implementation of this nice, highly configurable software package. They told me the following: we started the engagement, we took off the plane, but then we didn't know where to go to, and we didn't know where to land. This customer dared to say, let's fly back. Then he did the following: let's redesign our operating model. And let me give you an example. This company is in a business where they are servicing and maintaining car glass shields. So when you have a broken shield,
right?
They have 3,000 outlets in Europe. Every outlet has its own stock. But you should know, with all the new technology in glass, they have an SKU of maybe 100,000 different car glasses. So if my car glass is broken, where do I go? So what they had to first design, I need to redesign my warehouse principles. Where should I have my stock? And I need to redesign first the customer journey, because you can't go to a shop and say my car's broken and let's fix it. So they did first redesign, again, my operating model. How do I treat my customers? How's my logistics? How's my distribution? Done that, the design was clear, clip and clear, and very important, visualized in such a way that everybody agreed. So the company took maybe 3 months to redesign. And guess what happened with the implementation? Half time. Half time. Meaning they took off, lost 3 months, spent 3 months to do it again, redesign again, and then at the end, in 6 months' time, implemented. So the 1.5 year planned brought back to a year. But they dared to fly back, did the phase 0 planning, redesign of the model, redesign the operating model, and that principle applied to the system integrator, went live within 6 months.
That's interesting.
One example, and I have multi more.
Yeah.
But you need strong leadership, committed leaders that first think, who owns the destiny of my company?
Right.
Is it me or is it my system integrator?
Right.
Well, the audience will say, of course, the leader. Well,
that's not what all organizations.
You need strong leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also talked about something that came up in an earlier conversation before this podcast today. You and I sat down with a professor at the University of Antwerp, and I actually interviewed him for this podcast. He'll be on this podcast in the future. And he interviewed me for one of the shows that you produce at Mavim. And one of the things he talked about is he has a database of over 100,000 case studies that he's analyzed quantitatively and qualitatively in case studies for digital transformations. And one of the key root causes of success versus failure, and according to his research, is decision latency is what he called it. So
Yeah.
in other words, how fast can a company make a decision during a digital transformation? And the ones that take longer to make decisions, not surprisingly, are more likely to fail. They're more likely to have budget overruns, time overruns, and that sort of thing. So what you're talking about here, it sort of addresses that root cause in the heart of why so many projects fail. Because if you do what you're saying, which is I define my future state business processes up front and what I want that future state vision to be, and then I go implement technology, those are you're more likely to succeed. You're more likely to finish on time, on budget.
Yeah.
But what do you say to organizations that say that they should, or system integrators that say that you don't need to worry about business process management? Our software has best practices. Our software will give you the answers of how your future state processes should be. So don't bother doing all this BPM stuff that JJ's talking about. Just go straight into the implementation and we'll do it for you. What do you think of that approach?
Yeah, so I understand them, and my advice to the audience is then, okay, if you have a best practice, please can you show me then?
Mm-hmm.
Show me the best practice for my type of company, in my typical industry, in such a visual way that if I'm, for example, one of the decision makers, that my board understands that you do have indeed the best practice, that I do understand that you indeed are a system integrator in my domain, visualized for my typical company from end-to-end processes, visualized in a way that I understand, my board understands, and then show me examples where you go to the details. For example, in how, as your advice, in my case, now after Corona, how should I redesign my customer journey? Because my supply chain, in the old days, it needs to change.
Mm.
So show me in a way that I understand, because there are people that have that ready. They have indeed best practices. I know them. They have that visualized in the digital platform, and that digital platform is connected to then, if we all agree on this, yes, this is the way, then that is the design principle to do indeed the best practice implementation of then the solution, the real software.
Mm.
So we are more, or they have more or less the visualization of the future digital twin of your organization.
Yeah.
Used as a design towards your implementation design of your software.
Right.
So that would be the answer. Ask them to show. And the funny thing is, the best guys will not show software. They will show process models, operating models, how should you organize yourself, and then in visualizations that look like a PowerPoint, but now in a digital format.
Right.
If you find those partners, guaranteed success.
Yeah. We're here live in Amsterdam with JJ Vossen from Mavim Software talking about business process management in ERP implementations and digital transformations. We've got a lot more to cover. I've got more questions for JJ, but we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear?
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Can I do anything you ever dreamed to be complete? Yes, are the nothing that falls.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at Transformation Ground Control. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, the company I work for, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success through digital strategy, software selection, implementation planning, and implementation. And of course, one of the services we provide is business process management throughout all those different cycles of a transformation. And speaking of business process management, that's the topic we're in the midst of here with JJ Vossen from Mavim Software. Let's jump back into the conversation. I think where you're going with this, it seems as though business process management isn't about technology workflows. That's part of business process management, but it's a small subset of a broader set of end-to-end processes. And yes, the technology you're deploying is going to have a role in that, but it's not just one system. Typically, there's manual processes or things that happen outside of a system. There's integrations to other systems. So being able to look at that entire thing end to end is a lot different than saying, no, I'm just going to implement this tiny little sliver of technology. Even if it's an ERP system, it's not going to do everything you need it to do. So you're going to have inevitably processes outside of the software workflows.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point.
Yeah. So again, and therefore, those parties you can find, they will have visualized, how should I set up my strategy? So what are my KPIs? Because the implementation is we have to be honest, it's not the big party, but you want to make sure that's fast, it's done according to what you want, and the money you will make after implementation. But during the implementation, let's say it's a strategy, then you need to process, but you also need to understand, how does my enterprise architecture look like? So the same platform should understand, I'm not going to replace everything. I'll replace a piece, but where are my interfaces? Because that's what you need to also to make sure that you don't, okay, funny, we have now a new platform, and wait a minute. You will always have left legacy. You need to understand where is that, so that you understand that before you go live, you need to test that. So you need the total picture from your strategy. So how it's impacting my processes. What does it impact for the people? People need to understand.
Right.
Is it better or not? Will it improve? Will I be happy or not? Because you need to do that. Because if it's not clear to them, you found yourself all the people that will boycott your project.
Right.
So that the clarity upfront from a people, process, technology standpoint in the enterprise architecture, and then guided by principles like set KPIs, set principles, what do we want to achieve, so that everybody on a constant understands how hard it is, but we're doing it for a purpose.
Right.
The purpose needs to be a business goal.
Right.
Very important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's some questions coming in and comments that I want to get to from the audience here. First of all, this is one that I know you're going to be interested in, JJ, and that is, can you spell your company's name? So despite the proper pronunciation you had, can you tell us how to spell Mavim, just so they can learn more about you?
Yeah, M-A-V-I-V-I-M, Mavim.
Yeah.
Did I do it right?
M-A-V-I-M.
Oh, M-A-V-I-M. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not M-A-L-V-E-N as suggested on
Mavim.
YouTube. It's Mavim.
Sorry for that.
That's all right. That's all right. So a lot of people joining from throughout the world here today, everywhere from India to Denver to in between, South Africa. We've got someone from South Africa here as well. So thank you for commenting there. Just a couple of comments here that I want to get to related to the question I asked earlier. I asked the question of when should business process management start? And Alcinda on LinkedIn said that it should take place from the start of the digital transformation planning process, as you need to perform an audit of your current state and what your desired end state should be, which then determines what technologies to deploy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much sums up the entire interview. We don't have to continue. I think that's sort of she solved all of our problems there in that one comment.
She's
I think
looking for a job.
Yes. Maybe so, but I mean, kidding aside, and that is a great comment. Thank you, Alcinda, for that. But that is really spot on, would you say, with how you should approach business processes. Let's talk about current and future state, though.
Yeah.
There's also a mindset or a school of thought within the digital transformation space, especially with software vendors and system integrators, that would suggest don't worry about your current state. It doesn't matter. You're going to replace it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that?
So again, future states, no brainer. You need to have your North Star. You need to know where we're going. And then current state, let's say, focus on the areas where you know anyway, there will be a big change. So you better make sure that you understand current way of working. And it's not that you all document it in the right way, but you need to understand the impact on the people. Because if those people don't understand the why and the how of change, you found your saboteurs. So it's more or less, and again, then if you say, it might take me 3 years to do my current state. No. Focus on, for argument's sake, on the supply chain, because there are the big changes. On your customer journey, there are the big changes. To be honest, on your finance processes, hey guys, don't bother.
Right.
But supply chain, customer journey, there where you make the impact with your company. Better make sure that how do we work today? What does it mean? And what does it mean and also for the software you're looking for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there you need to find the software that's really supporting your idea about your new way of working, your new way of generating the supply chain end to end. And certainly for those in Europe, where now ESG is hitting us hard, you can't blame. You can say, "Oh, I'm clean." No. You're responsible for the whole chain.
Right.
You need to understand who's making what waste where, because the legislation people will ask you.
Right.
So you better be sure how it's now and how we're going to change that.
Yeah.
And then understand what does it mean for these people? What does it for my outsourced company? So that's important. Don't do everything, but do the ones where you know there's a big change.
Yeah. And or where you have areas of competitive differentiation, things that make you intentionally want to be different. You don't want best practice. You don't want the way the software works off the shelf necessarily, because you've developed something that makes you better than your competitors.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Here's a question that's sort of related to that. Or this is from Kyler on LinkedIn. Kyler says, JJ, can you parallel path the two, select new technology and BPM optimization? Or do you recommend, and this is back to Alcinda's point too, she was suggesting what I would consider the ideal state. If you have the time and resources and the vision to do this, do your BPM work, choose the technology or technologies, then do additional BPM work in more detail once you start implementing the technologies. What about doing in parallel, BPM with software evaluation and selection?
Yeah, I would say again. First of all, I would say depending on the case we're talking, that's of course. But yes, I would say why not? Because then step by step, let me give the politics. Step by step, people say, okay, we're already on the journey.
Right.
So we're not only in a mode of thinking, because people don't like that. People want to see results. So that's a little bit, it's more or less, I would say this is a maybe potentially political correct way of doing.
Yeah.
So you start, for example, for argument's sake, we made a decision. We are going for best of breed. So let's first focus on the supply chain. So then, okay, let's say supply chain. In the meantime, look for one of those 3, 4, 5, 6 vendors that are one of the best of breed leaders in that space. Let's go for that. I know those customers that do that. We do that first, and then we go for whatever customer facing, customer journey.
Right.
Do it there again, and take there a best. But again, BPM leading, software to follow.
Right.
But yes, I can imagine that is politically correct, and people will see then sort of results.
Yeah.
But again, very important. There's one word also: don't rush.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't want to say you should take all the time in the world. You shouldn't take all the time in the world, but you should take plenty of time up front to do the planning work that includes business process management. And back to that decision latency comment earlier about the team's ability to make quick decisions during an implementation. You're going to make quicker decisions if you have that clarity defined up front, because now you've got the blueprint for how you're going to build the house. To use that analogy. You would never, we wouldn't go out and hire a general contractor to go build a house without giving them the blueprint, or without someone giving them the blueprint of how the software should be built or how the house should be built. So why would we do the same thing? Why would we do that?
Exactly. And again, therefore, this business process blueprinting is meant to be to get everybody on board. That yes, of course, the why we change, but also the how we change. If that's agreed up front, and then you run the workshops in the greater details, you don't fall into the big trap that people start to argue, why are we changing anyway?
Right.
Before you know, you're back on square one.
Yeah.
And then you will lose the time, because then it has to escalate. So decision makers have to support it. Before you know, you get in brutal politics.
Yeah.
So you better be upfront agreed, and then it can move fast. Because then people think, yeah, I understand.
Right.
And if then a screen is blue or green, nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
As it's logic, I understand it. Okay, I know my role. I know my career, very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it will go fast.
Yeah. You're touching on an important topic that I want to get into a little bit more, which is change management, as you talk about executive sponsorship and resistance to change and decision making and leadership. All those things sort of tie back to change management. how does business process management enable change management or effective change management?
So our platform is branded by Gartner as a future digital twin of an organization technology. In that technology, we consider, of course, the basics are processes related to people, roles, responsibilities. One of the very important components of the platform is the communication and collaboration. So if and when, and then that means also communication means if I'm a board member, I'm not interested in detail level 6 of a process. I'm interested in what is it going to bring on the 5 strategic intents. I understand that. I understand the word strategic intent, goals, KPIs. But then I'm somebody in a warehouse. I do want to understand the details of a process, but then visualized in a way that I see a visualization where I see, that's a forklift. Of course, that's me on a forklift in a process. Oh, how neat is that? So the communication of the process future way of working should be by the lens of the individual. So the enterprise architect will look at it from an architect standpoint. Somebody on the ground will look at it from his little forklift, and the other one thinks in intents. That's communication. Now that we are in agreement, then we need to ask the people, please confirm. The collaboration platform, it's Microsoft Teams and all that stuff. Confirm, agree, and if not agree, comment. So that people get the feeling, I'm engaged. I decide my own destiny, so that nobody can then say, typical Dutch, not invented by myself, it cannot be anything. So, no, you were engaged. You had comments. Look here. So we're all in agreement, let's go. And that takes time. But again, a platform will support that. It is measurable. And also very important, if certain people don't comment, hey, now suddenly that's a potential area of, hey, what's going on? So
Right.
BPM in a platform like this Mavim platform will support the adoption of change.
Right.
And that is so important. If people don't want whatever you want as we had with this Hans Mulder, this professor, it was in time delivered, it was in budget, but what happened? Yeah, nobody used it.
Yeah, no business value.
Yeah, no, and nobody used it. Of that group in whatever Italy or wherever, they didn't use it. Yeah, big failure.
Yeah.
So then again, you need to make sure that people are committed to work. We have customers where the people said, "When do we get the system? I can't wait for the change." That is the dream.
Yeah.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
When do I get the system?
Yeah, because we're so excited to use it. Yeah.
But they understand, hey, this will bring better and let's say smart work.
Yeah.
Versus all that labor intense, not that clever work.
Yeah. Yeah. The manual searching of information, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We're here live in Amsterdam with JJ Vossen from Mavim Software talking about business process management in ERP implementations and digital transformations. We've got a lot more to cover. I've got more questions for JJ, but we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at Transformation Ground Control. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, the company I work for, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success through digital strategy, software selection, implementation planning, and implementation. And of course, one of the services we provide is business process management throughout all those different cycles of a transformation. And speaking of business process management, that's the topic we're in the midst of here with JJ Vossen from Mavim Software. Let's jump back into the conversation. Also, at the heart of business process management, in the heart of Alcinda's question a moment ago, or her comment about where business process management fits and how the timing should work. There's also current state, future state, and so really at the heart of change management is how is the organization changing? And we can't be good at change management. We can't do change management well if we don't understand current state versus future state. And so at the heart of BPM is really a way to capture that, to kind of look at the way things are today, more importantly, how everything's going to be in the future and what are the gaps. And that becomes the premise for how you communicate and how you handle change management. So I think that's another reason why BPM is so important. But you were talking about business value or lack of thereof, of people not using the software. Congratulations, you finished the time on budget. Congratulations, you finished on time, but people aren't using the system. So is that a success? Some might say, yes, that was a successful project because you were on time, on budget. Most, I think you and I would agree, it's not a success if you're not getting people to use it. How does BPM help people or help organizations get better usage of the software and better value out of the technology?
So let's say, again, good preparation, good give them feeling that they're engaged. And then at the end, what's also important, and that's what we created, that we are, in any engagement, we are part of the core new application. So we make sure that we have on this is maybe very technical, but on screen level, we have an integrated view. So if and when somebody in the morning, first day, he gets engaged, he starts a new application, and he said, "Oh, I had my training, but oops, what?" In the case of Mavim, press the help button. You are in this order entry. Okay, help. Then help, contextual help will start, and you will see your row in this situation, in this screen. This is your work instruction, totally integrated, so that people, first of all, know whatever happens, there's always help. Clarity, and also very important. And one of the classic examples, people say in the morning, "Oh yeah, let me call the support desk, guys." I know customers that said we shut down the support desk for phones. You need to first go to help. Because you can see that if they didn't press the button help, guess what? You don't get help. You need first to figure it out yourself, and then if you don't know, then you have to send in a ticket. So now you send a ticket that will be passed to ServiceNow. Ticket is supported, and immediately the support desk sees, this professional was in that order entry screen. Oh yeah, and oh yeah, indeed, he's right. Because of course, after go live, there will be for sure things that can improve. Right. But that's the way to do it. So it's totally integrated, and then people have to comment. And then, of course, support desk need to respond very fast. So people get the comfort feeling. Oh yeah, I get help. And then, of course, people will not moan, and they will adopt to the new way of working, and they will not do what's also classic. Sometimes people say, "Yeah, let's have the old system to the left and the new system to the right." Guys, no, it has to be only the new system.
A non-digital twin is what that's called.
Non-digital twin. So
manual twin.
So the big trick we have is that is very neat. It's integrated. So the process of the business into the application process, into the screen. Click and you see it. So you can use it for training purposes. You can do it for support purposes, but also in your. And now after 1 year, somebody comes to the corner and he says, "I want to pay cash." Oh, how to handle a cash transaction? Okay, help. Cash, work instruction.
Right. That's a great points. Speaking of great points, there's more comments here coming in on social media. And again, from Alcinda, problem with best practices are they don't necessarily have your business context. So similar to what you were saying, that I would argue, I'd go one step further and say there is no such thing as best practices. There's things that people call best practices, but I think it's misleading to say that they're best practice, because is there some sort of universal arbitrator of what best practice is? That'd be the other question. Or does only Microsoft or only SAP or only Oracle knows what best practices are? I guess that is more of a rhetorical question as far as.
If I will be the audience, the best practice is for you to judge if you understand them.
Yeah.
And again, it's brutal to say, don't rely on the word, we have the best practice.
Yeah.
Check for references, ask for the real decision makers, and then show me
what the software does, and you decide.
Certainly, you decide. Is that? Do I recognize my future, and if that indeed there are companies that have indeed visions on how should you run your organization because they have the time and they did that, and they have domain expertise, and those companies do exist.
Right.
So yeah, ask them, show me the proof.
Yeah. It's a good approach. Sound advice for sure. Here's a comment I want to get to. This is from Zalid on YouTube. And Zalid says, we're developing our digital strategy through a consultancy firm. As per their first draft, they only touch a few components, and we couldn't develop a business case for our board approval. So I guess I want to come back to that. When you look at business value, you look at the business case, how does BPM fit into that? Or first of all, I guess before I jump around too much here and ask that question of you, JJ, let me get your reaction to Zahid's comment on how the consultancy could only touch a few components of their business, didn't cover all of the business processes that were required to put together an end-to-end picture. Is that something that's common that you see when they don't have a proper BPM phase up front or a proper BPM tool? Is that something you see often?
If we get engaged, to be honest, no. But I would be scared.
Yeah.
If I read that, that is
it's not good.
Again, if somebody says don't bother, this is a classic example, and this is maybe sorry for being Dutch.
You can't change being Dutch since you are Dutch.
This is how should I say it in a political way? If a board doesn't approve that we prepare ourselves in the proper way, so that we do understand where we're going. Again, I don't know the details, but if the board says no, don't bother about the areas which are not of interest, then I would agree.
Right.
So there will be differentiate. There we have the customer facing. There we have the supply chain. Those typical hot buttons today. They said only concentrate for that. I would agree. There where it makes sense, go for that. But if somebody says don't bother preparation, just go for it. Yeah, that is set up for failure.
Yeah, it's a good indicator or predictor of failure. And in this case, I don't know if the board didn't approve the project, therefore it did move forward. Maybe it's a good thing if the processes weren't adequately defined, and if the board didn't feel comfortable, that might actually be
good. Of course, if they think, hey, that's not us.
Yeah.
If they don't recognize their own company, then they say, it would stop immediately.
Right. Here's a really good question. I was not planning on touching this topic, but I think you'll like this, JJ. This is from Matt on YouTube. Matt says, is it a standard practice to model the enterprise architecture for optimizing business processes?
So let me turn around. So you're building your future state business process blueprint, but processes are supported, of course, by applications and in your IT landscape. So there, where that I'm going to re-platform for certain processes, it's more than interested to understand what application platforms will be replaced, what will stay. So you need to have an end-to-end view on my current state of my enterprise architecture and my future state, so that you understand, after implementing this new application, which other application will be interfacing with that application, so that I understand how to maintain, how to do all my testing, and because assuming that everybody is in the same route, we go to the cloud software will have every 8 weeks to 12 weeks new updates. So you need to understand every update, what's the impact on the processes, but also what's the impact on the end-to-end chain of the applications that are all connected to each other. So therefore you need to model your enterprise architecture for that specific domain where that will be touched.
Right.
Don't try to model end-to-end architecture from a company of 100,000 employees. No. For the piece that the customer journey will hit the website, it will hit it will that. Okay, that we need to figure out. That's the piece we're going to focus on.
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. Here's another interesting question from Eric on LinkedIn. Says, how do you ensure alignment between the dynamic nature of business processes, which are addressed by BPM solutions such as Mavim, and the rigidity often associated with ERP systems. So in other words, you've got dynamic business processes, flexible, that are constantly changing, that you can change at any time. And then you've got ERP systems, which are relatively rigid. So how do you reconcile the two?
Yeah. So again, a very good question. Again, that's why it's not about Mavim, but that's why for example, like yourself, Eric, that's why you need to figure out in your enterprise architecture the base layered approach. So your ERP system should be considered as your system of record. So that is your base layer. And then on top of that, for those things where it makes your company unique, you need additional layers. So you find your, let's say, best of breed solutions around the ERP system. And then the next layer is, and let's for argument's sake, the low code, like the Microsoft Power Platform, where you have the innovative things that makes you unique, and also creates flexibility around brutal applications like an ERP system where I need 6 screens to do my time sheeting. You can have a little app that is figuring it out in one sheet and then feed the ERP system. That's the way to do it. So then you can have flexibility in layer 1, have unique capabilities in layer 2, for supply chain, whatever package, and then have your base layer, system record, you have the ERP, rock solid, to be relied, always on, invoice go out, but flexibility in the layers.
Right.
And in your BPM engine, you should describe that in a very clever way so people understand. And again, it needs to be architected.
Right. Yeah. And it's, even more reason why you want to define your business processes up front is so that you can identify where the ERP system that you're deploying might be too rigid.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That happens.
No problem.
You're going to have some areas where ERP is going to add a ton of value. You want that rigidity and standardization, but there's going to be some parts of your business where it doesn't fit. And that's okay. You have to figure out, what are you going to do? Are you going to customize the software? Are you going to use a manual process? Are you going to do a bolt-on system or add a third-party bolt-on system to address that capability?
Exactly.
There's different options, but if you don't know that stuff up front during the business process exercise before you start implementation, you're going to realize halfway through the implementation that, oops, this ERP system doesn't fit. Now I have to recast my entire plan because now I have to change my processes, which might be more painful than I'd like, or I might have to do some customization. I might have to go get a third-party bolt-on. Whatever it is going to take extra time and money that you didn't plan on if you would have had the BPM stuff up
there
front.
You go. And certainly for those implementations where you go cross-border, and certainly in Europe, again, there are legislation with all cultural things that's in certain cases, everybody wants to work one way. So let's be as standard, as robotized as possible. But guess what?
Right.
In France, they were completely different than in Germany and in Italy. So therefore, you need to apply the cultural things. How do we treat our customers? Use the same platform, but then implement it in a different way, or have little applications that support the local cultural things. Need to be upfront designed, and don't assume if we do this one brutal Salesforce implementation across Europe, everybody will adopt to that and will applaud.
Right.
I can predict the failure already. No, doesn't happen.
Right.
You need to apply local cultural, local way of working, having still the same application. But given the high flexibility and high configurable of all those applications, it can be done, but upfront designed.
Right. We're here live in Amsterdam with JJ Vossen from Mavim Software talking about business process management in ERP implementations and digital transformations. We've got a lot more to cover. I've got more questions for JJ, but we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at Transformation Ground Control. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, the company I work for, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success through digital strategy, software selection, implementation planning, and implementation. And of course, one of the services we provide is business process management throughout all those different cycles of a transformation. And speaking of business process management, that's the topic we're in the midst of here with JJ Vossen from Mavim Software. Let's jump back into the conversation. You know, I think BPM also, by doing that BPM work up front, it also enables agile transformations, because you can do the business process work up front, have that clear vision of what your processes are going to be, and then you can go deploy very quickly. You know, so it actually supports more of an agile approach, even though some might argue, well, that's waterfall. If you do all your business process work and requirements definition up front, that's waterfall. Well, it's really, I guess, more of a hybrid, though, but it is enabling that fast, agile rollout once you get to the implementation phase of the project.
Absolutely. And again, then back to my example, if you then have a workshop with the Italian team, with the French team, and the German team, they will feel that you listen to them. They understand that you really understand their other way of working.
Yeah.
And they will agree, we have same platform, but we will just configure it a little bit different. Nicely designed, but then also maintainable.
Right.
If then the French have a request for change, you understand, oh yeah, of course, because there we did this little switch to the left, and in Germany we did to the right.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you have the feeling, same platform, but we still do it the French way.
Right. Right. Exactly. Which is important. You're going to have parts of the world and parts of the organization that are going to take that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very, very good. Here's a question, a really good question from Kyler on LinkedIn. You touched on the vendor relationship, but I wonder how much influence they should have on your business process. Should you match the business process to fit the software, or customize to fit the process?
So, if I would be the audience, my process is leading, my company is leading, but you should listen to the vendor. So how, Mr. Vendor, can you apply my way of working, and how can you configure that in your software? And if you're still in a software vendor selection package, my processes are leading, and I'll pick the software that is configurable to my needs. For argument's sake, it addresses 90% of my needs. Okay, so the 10% left, another advice, don't change the software, but then create the layers around it. This new low-code, no-code application layers that makes it then specific to my needs. And be honest, sometimes, because you really have to be honest, are you want this now because that's your current way of working, or are you indeed want something that's really innovative that nobody's done before? Be honest to yourself. If you want to automate the current way of working, be honest to yourself.
Right.
Innovative, be brutal to the vendor.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Great advice. What about, we haven't talked about this yet, but as we were talking about current state versus future state, one of the topics that's related to that is business process mining.
Yeah.
So what is business process mining, and how is that different, or how does it fit within business process management? That's kind of that overarching concept of business process management.
Yeah. So business process mining is a technique whereby software is tapping into in data, and the data is gathered and is in such a way that it is visualizing the real way of working in a automated process software package. So it shows you, so I have a future design, I would like to work like this. By the way, how do we work today? So then in a sudden you see the gaps, and then in a sudden you see the business case, and you see, oh wow, here can we improve. So it's visualizing current way of working and where you have the misalignment or efficiency gains in a process, or in process in several teams or multiple countries, so that you understand the business case of change. That is current state. The preferable, what I prefer is that that after go live with a new application, make sure that embedded in that new application, you have near real time constant monitoring on. So process mining monitoring, so that you, after the change, very fast will see how your users are using the application, and who is conforming to the design or who's not conforming to design, or also very funny sometimes, where are finding people already little shortcuts so that even the throughput is going faster. So you can show that we thought it should be like this. Look here, somebody found this little route. That's clever. Let's apply it for everybody now.
Right.
So that you constantly, because certain CEOs tell me, a project, we need to do it, but the real money going to make after the project. And certainly when we do this near real-time process mining, where we have constantly monitoring about where can we still improve, where can we find the misalignment, and how can we keep in compliance towards design versus current way of working. And that constantly layered on top of each other will give great insights. And then continuous improvement managers love this, because that's the art of the possible.
Right. Yeah, and it's also a good reminder too that implementation or transformation should not end at the time of go live.
Oh, no.
There's a lot of work that should happen if you want to get real business value out of your investment. There's a business process mining is a great tool to do that, as is business process management in general. But it's fascinating to me the dynamic or the organizational behavior that we see so often, which is, I'm just so relieved that we went live. Now I can go back to my real job and we're done here. Let's move on and go do the next thing. But and in many ways, that's when the real work begins. Now you've got the platform in place. Hopefully you've improved some of your processes. But now inevitably you fell a little bit short on where you could be getting business value. So why not do some process mining? Look at, are we really getting that standard operating model we thought we were? Are we really increasing efficiency? If not, why? You know, if let's just say business process mining showed us that we thought a process was going to take this long, but it's actually taking this long. Why is that? Maybe people need to be retrained. Maybe there's some root cause. There has to be a root cause of why we're not getting the business value. And business process mining can be a good way to optimize your transformation investment. And then why not? So why wouldn't you just use Visio or some other free process mapping software that's out there? Like, in other words, why would we want to use a product like Mavim, a more robust tool like that, when we have Visio? But what's the advantage there?
So thank you for that good question. This is not a sales pitch, but Mavim is using Visio. So we use the Visio ease of use with a database repository underneath. So the other question to Mavim guys, why do you need a repository? Because what you want is that that a process is at the end in an organization, could be, for argument's sake, 300 Visios. But you want them all to interconnect from an end-to-end process until level 6 of the details. So, and then therefore, if you have a freeware design tool, you can't connect that in a structure. So you need a structure, and a structure needs a database. And in this case, in the Mavim case, any object in Visio is a database object where you can have elements, data elements, whatever, so that you can, for argument's sake, ask the tool, or tell me more about, what is, how many of this or how many of that, or why is it that, and what are the risks, what are our controls, where, for example, on the process, what applications are supporting that. You can put any data into that repository, which is then visualized in a Visio. So it is still Visio, but there's a massive database underneath that is building and giving you all the answers you would like from a process view, a board view, a enterprise architecture, Archimate view, all from the same source with a different lens. So even from a Power BI lens, show me all my applications, risk versus value, not from an Archimate, so the typical enterprise arc, but from a business view, in a Power BI view. Oh, wow. Therefore, you need a database under Visio.
Yeah. And it not only does it show the connectivity between these different business processes, but it allows you to also capture additional details that you wouldn't capture in a Visio diagram. Like, for example, if I have a step in a process that maybe it's just one box on a process map, but there's underlying details of what's the form I use, or what kind of information should I gather? What are the questions I should ask the customer to create a customer order? That's a step in a process, but you also have details you have to capture there. So from a training and enablement and just a clarity of definition of a process, a tool like Mavim can add those extra layers. And
Your work instructions which you make in Word,
yeah,
which are connected to this object in a process.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I want to get to a couple audience questions, and then I'm going to ask you sort of a summary wrap-up question here in a moment, JJ. So just a couple comments here. Alcinda again has a great comment on LinkedIn. Agility and flexibility is necessary because changes or disruptions are not only instant, but can be driven by external factors that are, like JJ says, unplanned. So great point there from Alcinda. So thank you for that. Here's an interesting question. You and I have never talked about this, but I find it fascinating. I don't have a good answer to this. I'm curious to see if you do. This is from Dennis on LinkedIn. Dennis says, can AI enhance decision-making during your BPM initiative? So AI, how does AI fit into all this? Does AI fit into business process management?
So the question about decision-making is, so you can imagine that that Mavim is a Microsoft-based platform. So if there are Microsoft lovers in the audience, you can assume that, of course, Copilot is totally integrated into the platform. So how can Copilot, so generative AI, support BPM initiatives? For argument's sakes, if and when an organization with 1,000+ users, you will have process owners that create, let's say at the end, on level 6, they create all the work instructions. So if you have 20 people working on work instructions, there's 20 people that have some are artists in writing and others are not artists. So you will have a very inconsistent 6,000 work instructions. Copilot, please help. Please restructure, make it consistent. That's the art of artificial intelligence in BPM. In BPM, for example, our process mining engine is based on Power BI. So Copilot for Power BI. So you can, of course, have a data analyst check for the inconsistency in the process. You can also ask Copilot, find me the inconsistency. Just find it. So ask, he will give it to you, and then you find it, and you see it, and then you can have it way faster. You can ask what is the best practice for a supply chain process?
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, hey, this is the best practice from whatever my consulting firm. Let me check on Copilot.
Yeah.
Show me a Visio, a supply chain thing, and then he comes up, and then you can have a discussion.
Right.
Because he finds it in the domain available. That's of course those are the little use cases that we see happening in our case, because we have Copilot. So then and our customers then use Copilot in Mavim, but then they use Bart from Google, and they have the other ones, ChatGPT, and then benchmark the 3 of them. So really clever.
Interesting.
Clever to ask ChatGPT, what is your view? Bart from Google, and then Copilot.
Yeah.
And then the discussion with companies like yourself. What is your view?
Yeah.
Well, then make the wise decision. So it's helping indeed the decision-making process because you have unlimited resource findings.
Right.
While, if you have to Google yourself, it takes too long.
Right.
Those engines are fast.
Yeah.
That is this. But again, those use cases about those work instructions is a real life case, because every so often new software, new impacts on the process. So you have to change a lot of stuff. Copilot does it for you.
Yeah.
Automated. So the smart work back to the people, and let's say the hard work to Copilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for that question. Great question.
It's a really good question. It sort of opens up a whole nother dimension of BPM, which is, with all these free AI tools that are out there, the generative AI tools like Bard and Copilot. A lot of it's not free, but a lot of organizations are using it. You got ChatGPT, which you can use for free. So AI is a tool that's out there at the consumer level. A lot of people understand AI or are toying around with it or playing with it. BPM is a good way to add a little bit of structure to how people maybe will use AI to do their jobs better, because some people may not fully understand AI. There may be preferred tools that we want our organization using. There may be preferred use cases where we want our people to use AI in these instances. And here's how we envision doing that. It gets back to business process mapping and defining that future state so that you can get input from everyone and how they've seen AI help them do their jobs, but ultimately someone has to decide this is how we're going to do it as a company, assuming we want a sort of a standard way of operating across an enterprise. So BPM can enable better use of AI, I would argue.
Yeah, it is at the end the formalized decision you made. This is the coming 3 months, we're going to work like this.
Yeah.
For 6 months or whatever year. And then, of course, depending on what happens in the outside world, and you have to change, you keep on use these kind of clever techniques to innovate, and then, of course, apply in your applications.
Yeah. And the BPM tool becomes that single source of truth for how we should be operating as a business.
Yeah, from the several angles, from the enterprise architect, from the process owners, from the application owners, from what have you, people that need to have access to the single source of truth.
Yeah. So just to bring this all full circle and to tie it all together, how do you recommend that organizations get started on their business process management efforts? What are some tips to just get started and those top recommendations you might have?
Yeah, so again, take your time. Make sure that your vision, strategy, and what you want to achieve is clear, well documented, and agreed. Make sure that you have a strong sponsor. And a strong sponsor is not somebody that signs up for the budget and also is tapping you on the back and telling you good job. No. Somebody that owns also the end result from a board level or at least management level, and then also supporting you in the early days of the preparation, so that all the things we are going to change is agreed up front. So anything you have to change that will impact the organization needs to be agreed up front. Otherwise, during the implementation, you will lose time. The latest you'll make the decisions. And at that time, maybe you have 20 consultants on board and 20 consultants waiting for 1 month. That's a lot of money. You lose a lot of money. So the better your preparation, the better your support from the board, the faster the implementation will go. That is my recommendation.
Yeah. And what I love about BPM tools too, just to bring it back to your last point there, is BPM tools can be a way to take a lot of detail about the operating model and the operational detail of an organization and bring it back up to the board level. So it's a great way to communicate from the board at the strategy level all the way on down to the frontline employee who has to execute on some of these transactions every day. Yeah. So it's a great closing point. Well, I want to thank you, JJ. That was a great discussion, and really appreciate all the audience questions as well. That's something we'd love to dive into in more detail in future conversations. So hopefully we can have JJ back here in just a moment. So we're going to shift gears here in just a moment and talk about the future of digital transformation, which by no surprise, or it shouldn't be a surprise, does include some business process management themes as well. So we're going to continue to talk about business process management, but we're going to expand the conversation and talk about all the other things that are critical to making digital transformation successful in the future. So we're going to jump into this keynote presentation that I gave here in Europe, actually, not too long ago. This is sort of our European themed episode, apparently, because I'm in Amsterdam with JJ filming this week's episode, and I'm going to play you a clip from another presentation I gave while in Europe as well. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
These things take time. Mom and dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation initiatives, including software selection, ERP implementation, project planning, and the program management, change management, and business process management within an implementation as well. So you can learn more about Third Stage at thirdstage-consulting.com. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to play you this clip that we haven't played before on this podcast, although we have featured it at times in some of our social media outlets, on a limited select basis. This was an in-person interview or a in-person workshop that I recently hosted in Europe, and thought, since I'm here in the Netherlands and we were talking about business process management with my guest here in the Netherlands, why not play you a clip from the last time I was here prior to this, where I gave a presentation at a workshop that we hosted with some of our European clients to talk about the future of digital transformation. So I'm going to roll you this clip, and then we'll sort of debrief it and unpack it here at the end. So let's roll the clip of the future of digital transformation.
We thought, pulling together sort of a global team, local team here from Europe, but as well as our perspectives in other parts of the world too, and certainly hearing your perspectives will be valuable in this discussion as well. So the way we want to kick things off today in this first session is talk about the future of digital transformation and just sort of where in general is the industry headed, and what some of the things that we're seeing in the space, and what are some of the things to be aware of or thinking about as you navigate some of these digital transformations. And then that'll sort of lead us into the next session, which is the digital strategy piece. How can we define a roadmap and strategy? So just a quick overview of Third Stage Consulting. I think you all know this, but we're 100% technology independent and agnostic, so we are not affiliated with any software vendors. And that is what gives us the luxury of being able to openly discuss the good, the bad, the ugly about digital transformations. We tend to focus on digital transformation from more of a business perspective. Yes, we have technologists on our team, and yes, we understand technology very well, but we tend to lead with the business aspects of what our clients' needs are and how transformation can fit within that. We're based in the United States, but we have an office based here in London, as well as an office in Brisbane, Australia, that handles all of the Asia Pacific region, and the office here handles all of Europe, as well as at times Africa and Middle East as well, although we don't have a huge presence in those two regions, but primarily Western Europe is where we focus our efforts here out of the UK. The name Third Stage is actually a metaphor for rocket launch. It's a play on the concept of a rocket launch where you're fighting gravity and inertia and you're trying to get something up to its final destination. And what we found is that just like a rocket launch where you've got gravity and inertia and other forces that you're fighting, it's a dangerous mission. And a lot of companies don't succeed in reaching that third stage of success. And so when we look at what does it take to be successful, we want to help clients reach that third stage of success. Not to suggest that it's easy, and that if you just hire Third Stage as a consulting firm, you're going to magically reach that third stage. But we want to apply and help our clients apply best practices to help them get to that third stage. And most organizations get stuck somewhere in the first or second stage. First stage is, if you can't get out of the first stage, that's basically suggesting that it's a failure. You never got anything off the ground, it didn't really launch, or it was an unmitigated disaster somewhere along the way. Quite frankly, most organizations don't experience massive failures that are showstoppers. I mean, we do have those, and we do quite a bit of expert witness work involving failures and lawsuits, but I would say that's a small subset of the entire industry. The bigger challenge is in some ways riskier because it's not as dramatic. Sometimes they fly under the radar, which is companies that get stuck in the second stage. And I'd say probably 80% of organizations get stuck in that second stage. And what that suggests is that in that second stage, they are going live with new technologies, but the go live itself and the use and the value behind that technology is not ideal. It's not at all close to what it should be. So in other words, organizations are spending too much time, too much money, and more than expected for lower business value than they should be achieving. So that's what we try to do, is help clients understand what does it take to get to that third stage. And it's not rocket science, despite the rocket metaphor. It is not rocket science. So there are some basic principles that organizations tend to overlook, and we talked about one already, which is change management. Let's just have a change person come in for a couple days a week, and they'll just deal with that whole pesky human people thing. That right there is an example of you will get stuck. Probably in the first stage, maybe you get to the second stage, but you will not reach the third stage if that is the approach you take. And I say that fairly universally and broadly, that I think that applies to most organizations. I don't know of an organization where, I can't give you an example of an organization we've worked with where they didn't really have to worry that much about change management. It wasn't that big of a deal. But a lot of executives think that. They think, well, okay, other companies have that problem. You all have that problem, but we're not going to have that problem because we're different. And our people are excited about change and that sort of thing. So that's really what the third stage metaphor is how can we avoid some of those pitfalls and help us reach that higher degree of success. And it's also, if you weren't familiar or weren't aware, I actually stole that metaphor from a rock band called Boston. They're from the late 70s and early 80s, an American band out of Boston. And they had an album, their third album was called Third Stage. So that's really where I stole the idea from, was from rock and roll. So some of the service offerings we provide, which we've coined mission control to go with the whole rocket launch metaphor. Some of the services we provide range from digital strategy and software selection. So organizations that are early in the planning phases of trying to figure out what their transformation is going to be. But we also do quite a bit of work in implementation. That's where most of our business comes from, is at the actual implementation, as far as program management, organizational change management, as well as process improvement. And we also have a practice that does expert witness work too, and that's about 15% of our revenue, which is bigger than I would have thought for a company our size. That 15% of our revenue is coming from expert witness engagements, where we're basically doing analysis and testimony for courts and lawyers involving lawsuits throughout the world. And the reason I bring up sort of that full spectrum of work and experience that we have, beginning with digital strategy all the way through implementation, post-implementation, as well as failures and expert witness work, is because we just have a broad base of experience to draw from. And what we're trying to do with the expert witness practice is make sure that our clients in the other parts of our business don't ever need our expert witness services. So we're trying to minimize our expert witness revenue and make sure that clients are doing more of that work correctly up front. And what we found too, and we do a fair amount of project remediation too. That's actually the fastest growing part of our business, is projects that are already underway. They've already selected the software, they've already started an implementation, but they've struggled or failed, and they hire us to come in and fix it. That's the highest growth part of our business, and that's a big part of our revenue, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. But one thing we find is that we're trying to do more to make sure that, especially the clients that hire us from the start, we want to make sure they don't make the same mistakes as the clients that are hiring us after the fact. Digital transformations a lot of times remind me of being a parent at times. If any of you who has kids in the room, children, okay, a lot of you do. So you know how you tell your kid, don't touch the stove, or don't do something that you know is going to lead to something bad, but oftentimes you have to let them. They're just going to do it anyway, and then they won't do it again once they've made the mistakes themselves. A lot of times organizations are like that too. They can hear this stuff all day and it makes sense, but when it comes time to execute, they end up having to make the mistake, and then they end up hiring a company like us to come fix it. Oftentimes clients will hire us up front for the initial piece of consulting, and then they decide, you know what, we can do a lot of this ourselves, or we don't need to do a lot of the stuff you're suggesting, we'll be fine, and then they end up rehiring us later to come back and fix things that would have been a lot cheaper just to do right the first time. So that's how organizational behavior tends to work, for better or for worse, is a lot of times they have to experience the pain in order to know what to do. So a full suite of service offering that we provide here within our mission control framework. And we work with a lot of different clients. This is a partial representation of some of the clients we work with, and I know we have clients in the room as well. But a lot of our business is in the world of manufacturing and distribution, but also financial services, professional services, government, public sector, healthcare. Yes, yeah, a lot of different industries, construction, a lot of engineer to order and make to order types of organizations as well. I'd say a little over half of our business is in manufacturing and distribution, and then the other half is in all other types of industry. So we're pretty neutral and agnostic in the industry side of things as well. So we're industry agnostic, tech agnostic, geographically agnostic, and yeah, that's a little bit about some of our clients. So most of our clients are upper mid-market organizations that they're not small, but usually they're not Fortune 100 companies, although we do have Fortune 100 clients as well. Most of them are somewhere in the middle, kind of the upper mid-market there. So let's talk about the evolution of digital transformation in ERP software. It's interesting because I've been in the space for 25 years, and so much has changed in the world of technology, and technology, in my opinion, is sort of on a hockey stick acceleration of change, which is directly causing a massive amount of change to organizations that are implementing technology. So there's a lot of change happening in the world of digital transformation, but at the same time, some things haven't changed at all. There's certain core things that you wonder, how is it that everything with technology and organizations is changing so much, but the organizational behavior and the way organizations are treating their digital transformations hasn't kept up with the pace of change. And some of the things that we think about when we're looking at helping a client through digital transformation is, first of all, what is digital transformation? And again, this is where our unbiased view of the market comes in handy, because we're not here to tell you that your digital transformation needs to involve ERP software or best of breed or middleware or a custom developed solution. I can't tell you what digital transformation means to you universally. I have to know and understand each of you individually and your organizations individually to be able to align a strategy that fits with those needs. And so when you look at the technological options in the marketplace, it's just been a proliferation of options in terms of the types of technologies that are available. Back when I started, the one thing that changed or has changed in 25 years is that ERP software back then was sort of like the one answer you had. You're basically going to implement an ERP system. It's just a matter of how you implement it and which vendor you use and that sort of thing. Now, that's only one option. Now you have other best-of-breed options with HCM and CRM sorts of solutions. You also have other types of technologies, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, just to name a few. In some cases, those capabilities are becoming part of ERP, and ERP vendors are out acquiring and developing some of those capabilities themselves. But in other cases, those are standalone options. And so what it's done is not only given you more categorical options for your digital transformation, but within each of these categories, you also now have a huge assortment and array of software vendors available as well. So the key here is to not get overwhelmed by this, but to say, let's figure out first what it is we want to be when we grow up, what it is we're trying to accomplish, and then figure out from this menu of options what type of technology might best help us get there, and within that type of technology, what specific vendor or vendors are going to help us best complete that process as well.
I'm here playing a clip of my recent presentation in Europe talking about the future of digital transformation. There's a lot more to cover in this presentation, in this keynote. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes every week at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also go watch all of our past episodes or listen to our past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. So be sure to check out that website and keep up with all the new content we're creating every week. I'm here rolling you a clip from a recent presentation, a workshop presentation I gave at a workshop we hosted in Europe not too long ago. And this is the future of digital transformation. Let's jump back into it.
It's amazing to me, all these years of doing this work, I still get asked the question of what's your favorite software vendor? You have to have one, you just don't want to say it out loud. Just tell me off the record who your favorite software vendor is, and I can't tell you, I really can't. I don't have like a strong preference or even 2 or 3 that I just really like. I can tell you software vendors that I think are doing a great job of, disrupting the market and creating a good alternative to what's been out there. I think there's some great options like that, but it could be that those options that I like are just a terrible fit for you. And so that's why I hesitate to ever say that I have, preferences or that any of us have preferences. Instead, what I always ask is, well, I can tell you the pros and cons of any option you give me. You want to talk about SAP or Oracle or NetSuite? We were talking about Infor earlier today as well. We could talk all day about pros and cons. That's what we do well, is just to understand those pros and cons, and that's really what I always challenge clients to do too. Is you want to understand the positives of where you're going, but you also want to poke holes in it to say, okay, this is our direction we're going to go in terms of the type of technology and the vendors. Now let's talk about what the risks are, like where are the gaps and what are the deficiencies of that strategy. Because no matter what strategy or specific selection or specific software you're going to deploy, there are trade-offs that you're making. There's some dark side that you have to address. And if you don't think there's a dark side, that means, it doesn't mean that there is no dark side, it means you just don't know what it is yet. And so that's a big part of it too, is just understanding that let's pick the best path forward, but then once we pick that path forward, let's also understand what the dark side is so that we can mitigate those risks and make sure that we avoid some of the common challenges that organizations. So this shifts gears. I have a handful of things that I think are going to happen and become evident or are becoming evident within the transformation space. And I apologize, sometimes when I read this text, I present this stuff a lot in a lot of different groups. Sometimes I feel like maybe it's a little bit too strong or a little bit too strong a language, but sometimes that's more effective to get to the point. But one of the things that I think is happening and will continue to happen in this space is that the dark side of cloud technologies will be exposed. And I'm not disputing that the market is going towards cloud, because that ship has sailed, whether you like it or not. The industry is moving toward the cloud. That's not up for debate necessarily, I don't think. But what is up for debate is the downside and the trade-offs of cloud. I think people are really excited about the opportunities with cloud, and cloud does provide a huge amount of upside potential. But I think what it's also doing is introducing organizations to new types of risk that they weren't prepared for, or perhaps haven't been experienced in overcoming in the past. One of which is a lot of solutions that started off on-prem but are now moving to the cloud. There's a lot of deficiencies and immaturity gaps in those products. And yes, cloud might be the best option longer term, but in the short term, what it's doing is creating gaps and deficiencies that organizations aren't prepared for. We have one client that's implementing, it's a big steel company in the United States, and they're implementing Oracle EBS. And right in the middle, it's a 7-year implementation. It's a massive, it's I believe our single biggest client in terms of size of the organization. But they're about 4 to 5 years, I think, in the middle of that 7-year journey. And right in the middle of it, Oracle came to them and said, hey, EBS is on-prem. You should really think about switching now to Oracle Cloud. And we already know that Oracle sales reps are heavily commissioned to sell cloud solutions, so they got a lot of pressure to switch to the cloud. And they actually seriously considered it. We helped them through the evaluation to determine that the cloud solution for a complex manufacturer just wasn't ready, or it just wasn't mature enough for their needs. So they said, no, we appreciate it, but we're going to stay on-prem for the foreseeable future until we know that there's a solution in the cloud that helps us accomplish what we need. And that's okay. I think a lot of times in the industry we think, oh, it's not in the cloud, it's on-prem. Oh, that's terrible. You're going to go out of business. That's the message that you oftentimes hear from the industry. But I think it's just something to recognize that you're probably going to have deficiencies and gaps in any sort of cloud solution you deploy, especially if it's a legacy vendor. It's not as true for like a NetSuite, because NetSuite was built in the cloud, so it's already reached a higher level of maturity compared to others or other cloud solutions. But it's just something to be aware of. The other thing too, another example of how the dark side will be exposed is if you set aside business value and business benefits for a moment, which is very important. So I don't mean permanently set it aside, but just set it aside for a moment and just look at the cost side of the equation. Generally speaking, we find that cloud solutions are going to cost more longer term because you have the ongoing subscription fees, the maintenance or the subscriptions don't go away. Software vendors, if they were in the room, would probably say, no, that's not true because you're going to save a lot of money and here's all the business value. Yes, there is business value, and the net effect might be that it's overall a better ROI in the cloud, but a lot of times organizations underestimate the cost that goes along with it. And a lot of CFOs tend to get frustrated over time when they realize, oh, instead of one big capital investment that we depreciate over time, now we have this ongoing OpEx cost that just never goes away. In fact, it increases over time. So again, it's not to say don't go to the cloud because you're going to spend too much money. It's to say you're going to spend more money, and let's make sure that you're getting the business value to justify that additional cost. Another thing is increased accountability and risk mitigation. I think organizations are starting to get smarter and a little bit more self-aware of what the risks are. I think organizations are starting to take more ownership and accountability for their own success. And sometimes I feel like we're motivational speakers because we have to convince clients a lot of times like, hey, this is your project. It's not our project. It's not a software vendor. It's you. You are going to decide whether or not this is successful. You can bring in the right partners to help you. And if things don't go the way you want them to, you make the change. And a lot of times I think organizations don't have the confidence and the knowledge to be able to think that way. A lot of times what happens, a dynamic that we see that I think is very interesting is that big software vendor, big system integrator comes in, they're the experts, and they will tell you how this project should go. And you're not going to ask a lot of questions because you don't necessarily know any better. You don't have a better alternative, a better option. And that dynamic is super unhealthy, and it creates this sort of learned helplessness from the organizations that are going through the project. They end up with an open checkbook, spending all this time and money on a project that isn't going well, but the problem is they don't always know what to do, like what's the best option. That same steel company I was talking about in the United States is one of the more unique clients that I've ever worked with, because what they did is they were working with Capgemini as their system integrator, and they ended up scaling back the contract with Capgemini, which is unheard of. That's blasphemy, to go to an Accenture or Deloitte or Capgemini and say, hey, guess what? I know you've got 50 people on this project, but we're going to cut that in half. You're going to get a lot of pushback from your vendor if you try to do that because it harms them economically, and therefore they're going to convince you that that's not the right path forward. But the answer isn't, is that the right thing for your system integrator? The question should be, is it the right thing for you? And so organizations just taking ownership and having that buy-in and accountability and the leadership behind it, that's what's lacking a lot of times. And a lot of times it's because it starts at the top. The executives say, hey, you're the project manager, go do this, go figure it out. And there's not that clear vision from the top of what the project should look like and how it's going to be managed and what the project governance is going to be. And that's a big part of what we'll talk about in implementation readiness here in a little bit, is what are those things you can be doing to take control of the project, to give yourselves the framework and the foundation to be able to manage the project going forward so that you are managing the project and you're not being managed. Because at the end of the day, this goes for third stage too. Third stage and other consultants go away at some point. They should go away. You're going to be the ones left with whatever is left, and you're the one that has to be accountable during the project as well. So that's a big part of what we're finding, is that organizations are slowly starting to accept responsibility and take more ownership of the projects. It's still not anywhere close to where it needs to be, but we are starting to see more of that in the market. Organizational change and human capital management are minimum investments in technology initiatives. It's amazing to me how much money organizations will spend on technology and then they totally skimp on the change management. And I always tell clients too, if you're going to overinvest in something or feel like you're at risk of overinvesting in something, try change management instead of technology. Chances are pretty high you're going to be a lot more successful. You may not get all the bells and whistles you want, but at least you know what you do implement is going to be a lot more successful. The other thing is, change management and this stuff here is not nearly as expensive and risky in some ways if you do it right. If you're investing in this stuff, that's a lot less costly than investing all this time and money in technology without change management. So it's more than just an insurance policy too. It's more, maximizing value and ensuring that you aren't experiencing operational disruption, for example. That's something that organizations don't think about. They think about the cost of the implementation itself, just the project cost. They think about the potential business value longer term, but they don't think about that middle part, which is what happens if you can't ship product? What happens if it's one of the disasters that Christina was talking about early on? What does that cost you if you can't ship product for 30 days? There's a real cost there that organizations don't think about. Or what happens if you can't run payroll for a couple cycles? It's a pretty big deal. You're going to have regulatory issues. You're going to have a lot of pissed off employees and that sort of thing. So it's really understanding that there is a cost associated with this, but the cost of not doing this stuff is a lot greater typically. We talked a little bit about this in the opening slide as well as even in the pre-discussion, but best of breed and interoperability will become more relevant, and it is becoming more relevant. And there's still cases where single, unified, integrated, monolithic ERP systems are the right answer, or it's a right answer within a subset of more answers. But more organizations now, and what we're finding with our clients is there's a lot of best of breed options out there that could be good options. Now again, if I were to get NetSuite in the room or SAP or anyone like that, they're probably going to say, no. Best of breed is dead. You need one single source of truth, one ERP system, all the same sales messaging that's been out there for 25 plus years. But the key is understanding, again, there's a trade-off here. Best of breed has definite trade-offs, but there's a definite upside too. So it's a matter of looking at two scenarios. If we do, say, a single ERP system, what is the cost benefit and the risk profile of that versus if we do some sort of best of breed approach. You could add other options too, even custom solutions. I know that's frowned upon in the industry because there's so many commercial off-the-shelf options. But there are cases, and a lot of times there's isolated cases within a lot of organizations where it makes sense to do some sort of custom solution because it's a core competitive differentiator, competitive advantage. It's so unique and so important to the business that you need something that an off-the-shelf system can't do. That's not the end of the world if you do a custom solution. There are risks, of course, but there could be potential business value benefits to that as well. So really just understanding those options and understanding that there are more options than ever per the previous slide we mentioned too. There is an increase in transformation failures, and part of that is we're seeing in terms of the growth of our expert witness practice and the project recovery part of our business. But it's also, if you just look at the dynamics in what's happening in the industry right now, there are a lot of things that are creating a perfect storm of digital transformation failure. In fact, a video that just went live this week on my YouTube channel dives into this in about 12 minutes. I talk about all the different dynamics that are happening in the space, so I'll try to summarize a couple of them. But a few things that are happening that are causing an increase in failures right now is, yes, technology is getting more advanced and there's more potential behind it. But what's also happening is that you have software vendors that are forcing upgrades through sunsetting their legacy products and moving clients in mass to cloud solutions. So you have a lot of companies that are going through digital transformation right now, whether they like it or not, whether they're ready or not, they're going through it because they're in some ways being forced to. At the same time, you have technical skills that are somewhat of a bottleneck. There's not enough technical skills to keep up with that demand that's being artificially created by the vendors who are trying to sunset you into new solutions. The general gist of it is that, one other one is Agile. You mentioned Agile earlier. The Agile movement is creating a lot of problems with digital transformation because there's nothing wrong with Agile, but when you take it too far, it undermines some of the structure and sequential discipline that Waterfall provides, and that's creating challenges as well. And so you add up all these things that are happening all at once in the industry, and it's creating a perfect storm of transformation failure. And there are ways around it, and that's the same things that I would have said 10 or 20 years ago. It's the same way to navigate those challenges, but the key is to recognize that the failure rates are higher, and we're seeing an increase in failures in troubled projects, partly because of all those things that are happening in the market all at once.
I'm here playing a clip of my recent presentation in Europe talking about the future of digital transformation. There's a lot more to cover in this presentation, in this keynote. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes every week at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also go watch all of our past episodes or listen to our past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. So be sure to check out that website and keep up with all the new content we're creating every week. I'm here rolling you a clip from a recent presentation, a workshop presentation I gave at a workshop we hosted in Europe not too long ago. And this is the future of digital transformation. Let's jump back into it.
This is more of a, I guess I'd call it more of a Tony Robbins moment. If you know who Tony Robbins is, the motivational speaker, is to, as I mentioned before, part of our job is to motivate and help people have confidence to, this is your project, you can be better. And if I had the raspy, cool voice, and if I was taller, like to your point, I'm a lot shorter than I'm.
Yeah, but you've got the same smile. You've got Tony Robbins' smile.
He's a good-looking guy, so I'll take it as a compliment. But this is where customers have to recognize that you have all the leverage. I mean, really, it is your project, and you need to make the decisions that are right for your business, regardless of what the industry trends are or what industry analysts or consultants tell you. You can listen, of course, but it's more important to recognize what it is you're trying to accomplish and really protect your interests, because I think that's something that's sorely lacking in the space, and I think ultimately it will be a downfall of the industry that will, I think, eventually lead to regulation. Back to Christina's point earlier, is that there's so much self-interest in the space that's harming organizations that are going through these transformations that eventually it's going to come to a head. And but in the meantime, until there's some sort of formal mandate for organizations to do things a certain way, you have to do what's right for your business and make sure that you're managing the project effectively.
It's quite tricky with an Oracle or an SAP. They have quite a lot of power. They have very rigid roadmaps. We're back into the customization discussion. Once you've made a choice of which vendor you're going for, you almost need to just follow their roadmap almost no matter what. And you might need to add some elements on the side, do it on smaller platforms to enhance what they've got, but you're pretty much stuck with what they're delivering.
Right. Yeah, unless you...
So your leverage at that stage is, or the client's leverage is constrained, isn't it?
In some ways, if you've put all your eggs in one basket like an Oracle, then yes, that puts more leverage in their bucket. But that's where best of breed sometimes can help, is you're mitigating and hedging the risk a bit. Certainly when it comes to implementation too, you don't necessarily need to hire one big system integrator that's going to do everything for you, because then you've really shifted the leverage to that party. We have some clients that intentionally will have multiple parties involved in the project, which can be chaotic and it can create other problems, but they do it because they don't want to have sole dependency or too much dependency on one third party, and so they intentionally try to mitigate that risk that way. So there still are ways around that. I think you're right. Oracle's going to do what it's going to do regardless of what you think about it, and you're either going to go along with it or you're not. The key is, what do you do if you don't go along with it? Could you find another option? Could you do a bolt-on, or could you say, well, we're going to let that ship sail on your roadmap, but we're not going to be a part of it, and we're going to stick, if we can we stick with whatever functionality or version we're on? Those are all easier said than done types of questions, but questions that can be answered or should be answered deliberately going forward, rather than just deferring to whatever the vendor thinks is the right thing for their customers.
Even if you're moving to a new system, if you're starting with what is going to become, and Logan, I'm going to defer to you a little bit on this, but a greenfield opportunity for a new ERP and enterprise operations system, you're still going to have to maintain the current system that you're on. Whatever legacy system that is, whatever interfaces to other systems is going on. And that requires a certain set of skills that may not come with, especially your systems integrator of choice that's going to be doing the implementation work. So there are always multiple partners, multiple parties to manage in that. And that's the overarching program that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. So it's not the project itself, it's the entire continuum of how do we move off of a legacy system onto a new system, what are the right resources to do that all the way along. That's really your responsibility, our responsibility in terms of the organization moving forward under this.
Right.
So.
And then the last point for this is that strategy is still important. So strategy and defining that roadmap, and to your point, making sure you've got not only the right solution or solutions defined, but also, more importantly, how are you going to deploy those solutions? And what is that going to look like? And how's it going to support your broader, bigger picture business strategy and objectives? That's the most important thing. And that's what we'll talk about next in the next session. So it's sort of a segue into the digital strategy discussion. So we'll dive into that in more detail, so I won't spend a lot of time now. But before we'll take a quick break and then get into the digital strategy and roadmap piece of it. Any questions or thoughts on this opening segment before we dive into more detail in the next one? We're going to shift gears now and talk about digital strategy. So defining digital strategy and roadmap, this sort of leads into the implementation readiness piece of it that we'll talk about as well. One thing that we've talked about, or a theme that's come up in the conversation so far, is this whole concept of choosing the right technology and making sure you've got the right technology, and comparing that importance of selecting the right technology versus implementing it really well and making sure that you've got the right strategy and direction and roadmap. And one of the biggest challenges we see with clients is it's not that the technology is broken or even that the strategy itself is broken, but the bigger problem is that the strategy that's being deployed doesn't fit the overall strategy of the company. And this, again, comes back to the point I made earlier, which is when clients ask, what's your favorite ERP system or what's your favorite technology, I don't have a good answer because I don't know. You tell me what you're looking for, and then I'll tell you what might be the best options there. The same is true for digital strategy. There is no one type of strategy that we can say definitively is more effective than another. But what we can say definitively is that the strategies that are aligned are going to be more successful regardless of what the strategy is. If it's aligned and the organization has a digital strategy that fits who they are and where they're trying to be, where they're trying to go, those strategies are generally going to be a lot more effective than otherwise. So that's really what we focus on here today in this session, is talking about how do we define a digital strategy that is aligned and fits with who it is you are as an organization and what it is you're trying to accomplish. So we can just jump right into it. So now we've gone from pretty high level talking to now a really detailed, hard to read slide that has almost too much detail on it. But I'm not going to go through each of these boxes because I could easily, and trust me when I say this, I don't want to have to prove it. I could easily spend 2 hours on this one slide, but I'm not going to. So you're welcome for that.
I've seen him do it before, in case anybody's wondering.
Yeah. I could talk about one slide all day, no matter what it is. But these are the sort of the major components of digital strategy, and really we just want to show you this and talk through it a bit to help understand, what is a digital strategy? What does that mean? And actually there's a couple slides after this or later in this presentation that dive into a little bit more detail of how we make some of the decisions within these boxes here. But generally speaking, we want to chat through what some of the major work streams and considerations are for defining what your digital strategy is. And if I were to summarize before we dive into it, if I were to summarize what this is not, what a digital strategy is not, is just defining on technology or just defining what the technology strategy is. That is a component of it. But as you'll see as we talk through this, more of this has to do with people and process and general strategy than it has to do with technology. Technology ends up being just one component of the overarching strategy that's going to be deployed. So if we look at these, I'll just sort of walk through the 6 major work streams without talking about each box within them or each chevron. But the first is business process management, and that's an important input and output from a digital strategy roadmap. The input being understanding what the current state processes are, because that is important to understand where you are today, as we mentioned earlier, or as we discussed earlier. Understanding what the current state processes are, what the strengths of those current processes are, and where the weaknesses and opportunities are is critically important. And part of that is because we need to not only have a clear vision of where we're headed and what the future state processes are going to be, and ensuring that we have a strategy that supports that, but also understanding what the gap is between the current state and the future state. So understanding where we are today, where we're headed in the future, that's a big part of it, because if we think about from a change management perspective, as we'll get to later, the magnitude of change is really important, and how big of a change our processes are going to change, or how big of a transformation those processes are, will materially affect the overall roadmap in terms of the implementation plan and strategy. So we have to understand where we are today, where we're headed in the future, what the magnitude of change is, and it also gives us focus and clarity on how we're going to manage the project. So the better definition we've done on business process management, the better governance we have around making decisions related to the project. Because you think about all the different decisions that have to be made that are material project decisions around scope, modules that we're going to deploy, or when we're going to deploy certain modules, whether or not we're going to buy that third-party bolt-on that could maybe do a better job than what we've got in our core system, or whether or not we're going to customize the software versus configure the software. all those major decisions can become pretty arbitrary and almost like shooting in the dark if we don't have clarity on what our business processes are going to be and where the real business value is. So that's why the business process piece is so important, is it really serves as that sort of a blueprint for what the overall transformation and the strategy is going to be.
This is also where we really develop the business plan, the business model that you're going to be taking both to the executive team as well as to anybody who's going to be working in the organization in the beginning stages of organizational change, right? So it's getting everybody on the same bandwagon to understand these are going to be the advantages that we're going to have in the future state, and this is the gaps that we're filling from the current state. So unlike some of the agile implementations where you're just implementing new software and you only care about the future state, you really need to back up and understand, how is this going to benefit the organization? What does our plan look like over the next 5 years to achieve the things that we're setting out as our business model? And then getting the whole organization aligned with that and getting the expenditure put together that is going forward. So,
yeah, and really defining the overall business case and understanding the business value that comes out of that.
I'm here playing a clip of my recent presentation in Europe talking about the future of digital transformation. There's a lot more to cover in this presentation, in this keynote. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes every week at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also go watch all of our past episodes or listen to our past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. So be sure to check out that website and keep up with all the new content we're creating every week. I'm here rolling you a clip from a recent presentation, a workshop presentation I gave at a workshop we hosted in Europe not too long ago. And this is the future of digital transformation. Let's jump back into it.
And then change management, understanding it's not a question of if this is going to be a significant change, because it is. It's going to be a significant change to the organization. And that is a one universal truth, even if it's a relatively small or minor upgrade or incremental change or incremental improvement to your business, it's still probably a greater change than your organization fully realizes. So the question isn't, is this going to be significant change? Is change management going to be difficult? Do we need to focus on change management? Do we need to have a change management plan? That's all, it should be a foregone conclusion that yes, it is going to be difficult. You need to focus on change management. But now, instead of just saying, well, let's just get some people ProSci certified, get them to learn ADCAR and go throw them on the project, we need to be a little bit more prescriptive than that and say, well, let's understand what exactly the changes are and what the general strategy is. And also, let's back up and look at what our culture is today and who we are as an organization today, strengths and weaknesses, because that's going to influence how we approach change management. Just as a quick example, if you're an organization that has grown through acquisition, gone out and acquired other companies, and now you're trying to integrate the operations and you're trying to standardize functions and standardize processes, but the companies you've acquired were very entrepreneurial, they're very nimble, and that's part of why they were so valuable as an acquisition target. Now you're talking about a cultural clash there. And so really having a deliberate view of what is our strategy from a change perspective of what we want the culture to be, that's really important. And a lot of times organizations say, well, we're just going to create a culture of digital innovation. I can't tell you what that means. That's a buzzword that we consultants created that don't have a lot of substance behind it. So that's a big part of the challenge is ensuring that we have clarity around what the changes are and what the culture today is going to be and what it's going to be in the future. So that's a big part of it. So doing an organizational assessment up front is one of the core fundamental aspects of doing change management or starting change management during your digital strategy. And one thing I'll say is that I have yet to meet an organization or a client that says to us, like, hey, Third Stage, You did a great job on the change management stuff, but you know what? We spent way too much time and effort on change management. We should have done less change management. I have yet to meet that client that says, I wish we would have done less change management on that project. Then we really would have nailed it or hit a home run or whatever the case may be. I'll try to avoid the American sports metaphors there, but I apologize for that. So that organizational assessment is a key part of it. Is really just understanding what the current state is and where you're headed. And then also the organizational impact and really understanding what does this change mean in general. We may not have yet defined a super detailed implementation plan yet. That comes next, and that's part of what we'll talk about in the next session. But we can start to define where are the major changes in the organization going to be. For example, back to the example of a global company that's gone out and acquired multiple entities and now they're trying to act like one global company, what is that going to mean at a high level to the organization? It could mean that our accounting and finance group is going to be materially affected. That's a big change because now we're going to move to a shared service model, and that's our vision, is shared service, consolidated, single accounting and finance department. How is that going to affect that group, and what are some of the major changes, and how might we start to think about our change strategy for those groups, knowing that as we go through the project, we're going to define those change impacts in a lot more detail, but we can at least start to paint that vision and understanding of where those changes are. And guess what? That change management piece, the change impact, that is on the critical path, because if we don't understand what those impacts are and how long it's going to take to get to that future state organizationally, it doesn't matter how fast we do the technical stuff down below. Chances are pretty high that the technology pieces are going to be compressed, or they could be compressed to be done a lot faster than it's going to take to change the organization. And that's the problem that organizations have, is they have a technical implementation plan that looks like this, but they're not accounting for the fact that the change itself is going to take this long. And so they're budgeting and putting together a plan that looks like this, but in reality, it was going to take this long and this much budget to get through the transformation. Yes, you can define a completely new culture, but getting there, culture doesn't happen, good or bad. The good and bad parts of culture don't happen easily or in a short time frame. In fact, the time it's going to take to change your culture is going to far exceed any sort of reasonable transformation plan, assuming you've boxed it in. And now, granted, some might argue, well, life is a transformation. We're always transforming. We're always changing, of course. But if we're saying we've got a 3-year plan to transform our business, you're going to move the needle on the culture, but you're not going to get to that future state fully. But the key is to understand what that future state is so that we can start bending the needle and moving that direction to get us closer there. And also recognizing that it's going to take years and years to change the culture the way we really want to, understanding that the cultural headwinds we have in place now are probably going to slow down any utopia focused plan that a vendor might give you. So a vendor says it's going to take you 18 months to deploy new technology. You might say, well, yeah, to deploy the technology, in these technology work streams here, that might be 18 months, but to change the culture and to change the organization, it's going to take a lot more than that. So we've got to figure out, reconcile that in some way.
It's a great point. And look, the culture is unique to your organization, right? Going through something like this, I would just point out, is before you've got a software vendor partner, it's before you've got a systems integrator partner, it's the organization itself with possibly an advisory partner, right? Getting into the organizational readiness to move forward with a new program is taking input from all areas of the organization, understanding what that looks like in order to affect the change. So that change management starts with really polling everyone throughout the organization, determining exactly how everyone is feeling about the organization, making decisions strategically about how they're going to move forward, if they've got confidence in that, how it's going to affect them individually, right? Because even though we're all about the organization, we're also all about our personal needs. And so this is really the beginning of that cultural shift, if you will, to a go-forward plan for the organization in terms of a digital transformation.
Their problems.
That's half
I totally agree, and that's half the battle or half the value of doing an organizational assessment is just the fact that you ask the end users. It doesn't even matter it does matter what they say, but of course, but I'm saying half the value is regardless of what they say, the fact that you just asked and got the input from the end users is important, because there's going to be so much counter messaging to that, which is, oh, we don't care what you do today because we've got best practices we're going to bring in with our standardized software we're about to roll out. That's going to create a lot of resistance if we do the latter. So doing what you said, just asking the question of what is it you do today, why do you do it, understanding that, it's going to help create buy-in, but it's also going to inform the project team so that when they define the digital strategy, they've considered all those things. And they've started to identify where the points of resistance are going to be, rather than saying, well, I don't care that you're going to resist the change because you're just going to do it because that's the way things are going to be. We have to understand those headwinds to know that this group here is going to resist change because it's a bigger change, or they take a lot of pride in what they're doing today, and this is going to automate a big part of what they've always done. And it may be the best thing for the business, but we have to understand that that's going to create challenge and resistance, and we've got to figure out and understand what that resistance is so that we can have a change strategy that mitigates it. And not only is it the users that are the source of the resistance, but then the mid-level management ends up becoming the face of the resistance. So then you have mid-managers who now have a lot more influence. Now they're pushing back and resisting upwards on behalf of the end users. And so if we don't start at the end user base, work our way back up on the resistance piece, it's going to be too much to overcome in many cases. In understanding the technology piece, which really are the next three boxes here, the next three rows, you have enterprise applications, which is sort of your traditional evaluation and selection of potential technologies. But even then, before you get into sending out RFPs and getting demos from software vendors, you really have to understand what type of technology is that you're looking for. Back to that very first slide that we discussed this morning, they had all the hodgepodge of different technologies with AI and ERP and CRM and that sort of thing. It's really just understanding what is it we're doing. Are we looking for a tier one big ERP system? Are we looking for a best of breed? Are we looking for an interoperability sort of model? Are we looking for emerging technologies like AI and machine learning and that sort of thing? Is it some combination of all the above? All that stuff we need to have a real clear vision on, and that clarity of vision comes from understanding the first two buckets, which are what is it that our processes are today, where we're headed, how is it we want to see the organization evolve, and even bigger picture than that, backing up even more, is looking at the strategy of the organization. What is it we are trying to do as a company, and what technology or technologies are going to best enable us to get there? And you're going to have different answers for different organizations, which is why it's highly ineffective to say there's one answer, and that is single ERP or standard off-the-shelf SaaS-based technologies. There is no one answer that's going to work for every organization. It depends on what the strategy is. We always joke internally about doing drinking games. About anytime you hear the word "it depends," we all take a shot. If it was later in the day, I might suggest that's a good idea, but may not be a good idea at this point. Back to the acquisition standardization example, maybe that's the executive vision, is that we're going to go acquire these companies, now we're going to integrate into a standard global operational model with shared services. But then we get to the digital strategy and we go out and we start deploying different instances of the software in different parts of the world. Well, that's exactly what you're trying to get away from, so that disconnect will inevitably create friction. Executives are going to not be happy no matter how it goes. If that digital strategy is misaligned with business strategy, executives will not be happy with the end result. In fact, so much so that generally what happens during the implementations that are disconnected is you end up spending so much time and money trying to fight those headwinds and fighting that misalignment with really no clear path to success other than make sure you get the project aligned. So I think that's the key, is to make sure you've got an aligned strategy. Even if the business strategy and or the digital strategy are not ideal, they're not perfect, as long as they're aligned, that's going to give you a lot more chances of success than if they're disconnected.
I think we do need one more chevron up here in organizational change management that just says drinking games. I mean, the unifying quality of drinking games.
The building morale and buy-in to the transformation. Right, exactly. Just one little bullet in there to see who's really paying attention. One little bullet, yeah. So looking at those strategic alternatives and understanding the enterprise application landscape and ultimately getting at least a starting point short list is generally a good output from digital strategy.
A lot of times clients that hire us will start with just a long list at this point because they have so much lack of clarity around their general direction and strategy. But regardless, you want to have some direction by the time you've defined your digital strategy of what type of technology it is that you're going to be looking for and ultimately deploying. And then there's the solution architecture piece too, and really understanding how different technology or technologies are going to align with your current state and the future state going forward. So a lot of times organizations don't think about that architecture piece, which is, not only the technical architecture of how systems integrate, but also the business architecture of how the business processes are going to align and how everything's going to tie together, what the interim plans are for all these legacy systems that might go away. What are we going to do when there's a new system for part of the business, but where we still have legacy systems for other parts? Are we going to create interim integration? Are we going to allow or just live with manual workarounds and that sort of thing? That sort of clarity is really important, because if we don't understand that, then we're not going to have a realistic implementation plan when it comes time to define that. So understanding the architecture and the architectural impact is important. And it's also organizational too. Understanding what your IT department is going to look like in the future. That's really important, because we keep coming back to your example of 5,000 IT people, because you probably have the biggest IT group in the room here. And so it's a good example of how we have to define what those 5,000 people are going to be doing in the future, what they're going to be doing in the interim, and then what is that change plan to help get there. Because that's another point of either resistance, which oftentimes happens where the IT group will resist the change because it's going to be such a dramatic change to their day-to-day jobs, or it ends up becoming really expensive because we didn't consider the fact that we needed to bring the IT group along as well. So we have to have that organizational architecture defined too, just what is that future state of the organization. And then the BI and analytics piece. How are we going to make sure that we don't just deploy technology that maybe it works fine, but now we can't get the visibility into day-to-day operations as we need or want to get from new technology. So having that clear vision or clarity of what it is that's going to allow us to get there. It could be that the enterprise apps that we've deployed are fine and it gives us the analytical tools we need and want, or it could mean that we need some sort of bolt-on, third-party BI tool, or like a Snowflake, for example, is a common tool that's pretty popular now, where it's working with other systems, or Palantir. Palantir, Snowflake are sort of two BI-ish sorts of options that allow you to take multiple systems and integrate. Companies have long used Power BI and other types of BI tools, Tableau and whatnot, to help take and get the most value out of the enterprise systems that they've just deployed, to make sure that they're getting data and visibility into the operations.
It's also a big part of your business case and your return on investment, right? Especially for your executive level people. They want to gain insights out of the organization in the way that it works as a full enterprise. And being able to unify all of those data sources. I mean, look, the organizations today, they have a haystack of data and information, right? We really shouldn't celebrate the fact that you've got a haystack of disparate information sources. We should really celebrate being able to find the needle in that haystack with an analytics system that works enterprise-wide.
I'm here playing a clip of my recent presentation in Europe talking about the future of digital transformation. There's a lot more to cover in this presentation, in this keynote. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 161. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes every week at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also go watch all of our past episodes or listen to our past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. So be sure to check out that website and keep up with all the new content we're creating every week. I'm here rolling you a clip from a recent presentation, a workshop presentation I gave at a workshop we hosted in Europe not too long ago. And this is the future of digital transformation. Let's jump back into it.
Well, in many cases, you can use basically benchmarking. So APQC, we use a lot to determine what a high-level return on investment should be, given best practices. But you also have to take the organization's own numbers into account. So if you've got disparate units, business units working globally that are doing their own thing, but nothing is funneling up to the corporate center entity, you know, as an organization, that you've got all sorts of business loss in terms of contracts, in terms of the procurement process, manufacturing process, delivery logistics, all of that information. If it's disparate and siloed, then you know that there's a huge return on being able to bring it into the center. So we have to analyze where are those sources in consolidation going to benefit, and how much does that equate to in terms of save time, save cost, contract management in terms of forced spend within contract parameters, that type of thing.
And then the last piece here too is the project quality assurance. So getting project governance in place and some of the risk mitigation controls, that's something that's important to do early on. Partially because when we are defining this digital strategy and roadmap, typically we're looking at multiple alternatives or options. We're looking at the pros and cons of different paths we could take, and usually it's not 100% clear cut which path is the best for us. So we've got to look at sort of a risk-adjusted cost-benefit analysis of what the costs are for each of these different paths we could take, what the potential business value is, and what the risks are, and ultimately how are we going to manage that project longer term. And so getting that project quality assurance in place is something that you want to do, partly because the risks start to become very apparent, at least at the tip of the iceberg during this digital strategy piece. And then when you get into implementation planning as sort of a next phase, and you get into more detail, then more risks start to get exposed. And so we want to start getting in that mindset of getting that quality assurance in place and that risk mitigation profile or mechanism in place so that we can identify and manage those risks. And that's really a key thing here is when we're going through this exercise with clients, generally we're looking at 2 or 3 different scenarios. You know, we've got 2 or 3 different strategies we could take. Just again, as that example of we could go with a single tier 1 cloud ERP system. That's one option. That's sort of one general path that's going to standardize our operations and potentially for that global organization that's trying to standardize through all their acquisitions that they're trying to integrate. In that case, it could be that that's the most costly path, but it could also mean that it has the highest business value or potential business value. And then the question becomes, are we willing to spend that much time and money knowing that the risk is probably a little bit higher, but also knowing that there's a lot more business value there? Or do we go with a more incremental approach? Maybe one that it's not quite as expensive, it's not quite as risky, doesn't quite deliver as much business value as we want, but it's more realistic for who we are. Those are the kinds of questions you have to ask, and really painting the picture of what these paths might look like is really important from an executive buy-in perspective, because ultimately you need the executives to be on board with whatever path we take, and they need to understand the risks and the trade-offs that they're making. One of the stories I like to tell on a personal level is when I married my wife, she had 2 young kids. They were 2 years old and 5 years old.
And actually, when we first started dating, they were even younger, but we were dating and she was a single mom. I didn't have kids of my own. And then when we decided we're going to get married, I realized, wait, I'm going to be a dad too. So I should probably figure out that part of the whole thing. I was just expecting to date and marry her, but it took me a while to realize, like, I'm also going to be a dad. So I had no idea what I was doing, like a lot of us as parents. And so I went and read a book called Love and Logic. And it's a child psychology sort of book about how to raise kids and give them choices and consequences and options in life and that sort of thing. And one of the really fascinating things is not only did it help me sort of jump in cold to being a dad, but it also helped me a lot in consulting, because a lot of times I feel like that's how you have to be with executives. Not to treat children, 2-year-old children, to executives, but sometimes they act very similar, where they want the world, they want the earth, the moon, and the sun, and they don't want any sort of risk or cost to go along with that. And so we take a lot of that sort of love and logic mentality with child raising, whereas you kind of have to sit down with the executives and say, I know you want that perfect solution that's 100% mitigating risk and it's 100% aligned with what you want, but you have to make a decision. It's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be pretty, but you have to pick one. You have to pick one. And usually it's a lot of, yeah, but I want that tier 1 ERP solution and I don't want all the risk to go along with it. And I don't want to do any customization, but yet I don't want to invest in change management either. You can't. That's impossible. So you have to pick one. Either you're going to allow customization, for example, or you're going to spend more time investing more time and money on change management. So it's just little things like that you have to make sure that you kind of treat executives that way, or force decision making in that kind of a way. So has anyone read that book, Love and Logic, by the way, or familiar with the concepts behind it? It's really good. I actually highly recommend it for transformations, because it gets inside the mind of a child, and I think a lot of that applies to like organizational immaturity and organizational growth and things like that. So that was not the intent of the book, I don't think, but I made it the intent for me.
Love your analogy, though. And I know from knowing your kids that this is a very effective consulting route to go to.
Yeah, my poor kids, they get so many, before I give them any sort of answer, I ask a lot of questions. Well, let me first understand, what is it you're trying to accomplish? You want to go outside and play? Well, look, tell me why. Why is that? So any questions on this general framework? I know it's a lot, and we've got actually a lot of other content behind this that we won't get into today, but it sort of unpacks each of these work streams. But really just wanted to paint the picture of what are the major things we should be thinking about as we define digital strategy, and then that leads us into implementation readiness.
How many versions are there in the last 20 years?
Of this right here? Honestly, I mean, this iteration was probably 2 or 3 years ago, and it continues to evolve a little bit, but I'd say the major work streams and things that should be thought about, for the most part, I would say you could have applied the same thing 20 or 30 years ago too, and I hope that you can apply this in 10 or 20 years, because it is pretty independent or agnostic, other than maybe the BI and analytics piece. That one's a little bit different. That one's a more recent one that wasn't as important 20 years ago. And who knows, it might change a little bit. I imagine it'll probably change a bit in the future as well. But I think it's something that stands the test of time and technology too, because it's meant to be something that you could use whether you already know you're going to do a big SAP S/4HANA implementation, or if you're just starting out and you don't know, or you're going to go with the smaller best of breed route. This same framework and mindset applies to any of those scenarios. It's just a matter of molding this and shaping it to fit whatever it is you're trying to do.
Again, the majority of this happens before you choose a software vendor or a systems integrator. So part of this is what we commonly refer to as phase 0. So it's before phase 1 and the implementation starts with a single software vendor or multiple software vendors, but it's something that the organization has to go through, right? So this is the advisory part of our business. Right. But it's what any organization needs to go through on their own.
How do I know that I follow the strategy or not?
That's where the next iterative phase of defining the implementation plan becomes important, and then of course the execution of that plan against the original plan. So it's the sequential sort of iterative approach where you want to make sure each step of the way you're staying aligned with what was done prior to that. And of course, things will evolve and change, and it may be deliberate that you're going to go off track here. We define the strategy in January, but then come June, we realize that there's some modifications we make. And that's okay as long as it's deliberate and not just lack of governance or lack of focus, because that's more often why organizations go off track, is because they they have this vision or they have somewhat of a strategy and they don't execute it the right way. But I think the bigger challenge, though, is just not having this to begin with and just jumping straight into, let's go pick a software vendor and then let's go start implementing without having done this stuff. And this is really as much of a strategic framework as it is a project governance framework, too, to help make sure that you stay on track. Because if we know what the low-hanging fruit is and what the focus is of the project, it's going to make it a lot easier for team members to make decisions that align with that than if we haven't gone through this exercise. Be created in collaboration with the project manager and the project team. So in other words, it generally, in at least the clients we work with, we don't come in and just talk to the executives and then hand it over to the project managers. Usually the project manager and the team, even though the team may not be fully developed yet, at least you know who the key stakeholders and leaders are that you can involve in that process so that you've got that buy-in. And even if we know hypothetically what the right answer is or the best answer is for the organization, that doesn't really matter, we as consultants, because it doesn't matter what we think necessarily. It's what you need to have that buy-in and ownership from the project team, back to what we talked about in the opening sessions around the ownership and what are the roles and responsibilities and how do we control the project, keep it on track. You need that ownership as a starting point to be able to get there. And the output itself is important, but what's arguably just as, if not more important, is not just the output of what the strategy is going to be, and we all agree that this is the strategy, we've made this decision, but what's also important is the strategies we didn't choose, because it creates a certain organizational confidence and alignment knowing that we didn't go down these paths, and here's why. Because inevitably what happens is, let's just say we skip this step, let's not do that, let's just go pick a software vendor. And let's just say we happen to get lucky, we pick the right software vendor, that just happens to be the right strategy for us. And we just sort of luck out in that way. Even if that's the case, which rarely happens, but even if that were the case, what will end up happening inevitably is there's some imperfection in that strategy and some risk that people will then start to doubt it, and they'll start to question it, and then they'll start to resist it, and then the whole thing falls apart, not because it wasn't a good strategy, but because the organization didn't see or understand why that was the direction. And so the way to counter that is to say, we looked at these different paths that everyone else or other people might want to go through. Here's why they're not good fits with our strategy. This one is, and that's why we're sticking to this one. And if you haven't gone through that exercise organizationally, it's almost impossible to not resist it, because you're going to find imperfections in the strategy. So
that's classically why most organizations, or many organizations, only get to that stage one that we were talking about, in terms of the 30 stages of digital transformation, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple other things here I'll mention. I'm going to come back to this slide last because it leads into the implementation readiness piece, so I'm going to skip that for now, but we'll come back and then that'll lead us in. But one thing that we talked about earlier without mentioning it with this exact name was strategic articulation and strategic alignment. How do we ensure that we take the high-level business strategy, which is what you see at the top of the screen here, and how do we break that down into tenets or strategic focus for the digital strategy? And this is oftentimes the first step we need to go through, is really understand the business strategy and set aside digital and technology for a minute and just understand the organization and where it is today, where you're headed, why are you trying to get there, and what is it you want to do within what amount of time. And then ultimately you take that high-level strategy and objectives and you start to break it down into what it means to the digital strategy. For example, tier 1 ERP system versus best of breed. Let's just say those are two, distinct binary paths, when in reality it's not quite that clean, but let's just say that that's an option or a decision we have to make. In order to make that decision, we have to start at the top and then work our way down to understand what is the business trying to accomplish, and then what type of roadmap or what type of strategic direction is going to make the most sense from a digital strategy perspective. And that digital strategy, of course, includes all the things we just talked about. It's not just the type of technology, it's also organizationally, what is it we're going to do to the organization, business process and operations, what is it we want to do there, and really just starting to break it down. And that creates the alignment we need to ensure that our digital strategy reflects what it is we're trying to accomplish. It also removes that headwind or that tension that often happens when you have a strategy that's up here going this direction, and then you've got a digital strategy that goes off in this direction. That creates a lot of tension that makes it almost impossible, if not totally impossible, to succeed in your digital transformation because you're not aligned as a team and as an organization. And it's amazing. To me, when I talk about it, it sounds so simple, and it doesn't sound like anything unique or earth-shattering, but it's amazing how many organizations just don't intuitively think to do that. But I think I think conceptually it makes a lot of sense. But the question is then how do we do it? How do we get decisions and alignment around some key decisions? And this slide here, it's a lot for one slide, and it's trying to condense a lot of ideas into one slide. But generally what we do, in addition to that strategic articulation, is then start to make more key fundamental decisions around our business and the digital strategy that is going to support our business going forward. So what you see here, I'll just sort of summarize what you see in the middle here, these two slides in the middle column. This is an example of a client engagement where we looked at current state and future state for one department. This is procurement for, on the top there, that was for procurement for one location within this organization. And what we did is on the top, all the red dots you see was sort of looking at the executive team and understanding what the current state is in terms of a spectrum of standard processes versus flexible, decentralized processes. So that's a spectrum. It's not an either or. It's a matter of understanding where it is we're going to fall on that spectrum. So we look at the current state of where we are today, and then we look at the future state, and the green is the future state. So this was an executive team of, 7 people, it looks like. 7 people, we got their inputs, quantitative inputs that is somewhat subjective, but they're quantitative inputs that measure where on the spectrum they are today and where they think they want to be in the future. And the reason we do this is partly to see how well aligned we are, both on where we think we are today and where we're going, but also to look at how big of a gap it is between current state and future state. So starting with the first thing is, are we aligned? You can see that even on the current state, this team isn't super aligned. They can't even necessarily unanimously agree on where we are today, which is, I don't want to say it's understandable, it's somewhat surprising, but it's very common to see this with executive teams. You would think that everyone's sort of on the same page, at least with where we are today. Maybe the future state's a little bit less clear, but even in that case, there's some misalignment there, and certainly when you start to define what the future state is, that's even more misaligned. So this tells us we're not aligned yet. That's not helpful on the surface, but at least we can quantify it and see that we're not aligned, and we've got to figure out how to get those clusters close together, at least on the future state, because otherwise we're going to have 7 different views and visions of how this project should go, and it's not going to be successful because you as an executive team are not on the same page. So, and keep in mind, this is just one tiny decision within a big transformation. This is just one example. There's a lot of different decisions like this that need to be made. And so what we look at it then is, okay, we're not aligned, and we also kind of see that if you look at the green, it's sort of leaning towards the left side of the spectrum, whereas the red is leaning pretty heavy toward the right. Even though they're not aligned, we still see that there's a fairly significant gap between current state and future state, which tells us that's a fairly big jump for this organization. So the procurement department is going to go through probably a fairly significant change. If those green outliers end up shifting over to the left with the rest of the group, it's probably going to be a fairly significant change. In other cases, we do the exercise and there's not a huge change. People don't envision that big of a change to a certain department or function, in which case it's not to say that change is going to be easy, but it's going to be easier than this case where we have a bigger delta between the two. So this is a way that sort of a framework we use to help get that alignment, but it's important to really think about all the decisions that need to be made as part of a digital strategy to ensure that your executives, starting with the executives, get on the same page, and then ultimately there's a lot of decisions that trickle down through the organization that need to be made at the lower levels of the organization. And this is a very, I'd say, diagnostic way of going about it so that we can now put together a digital strategy and also a change management strategy that better reflects exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish. And it's a little bit more surgical, I'd say, because now it allows you to focus where the biggest impacts are and where the biggest changes are, and it allows you to make sure that you define a strategy that addresses this stuff. And then once we've done these sort of exercises around not only the strategic articulation that we talked about on the previous slide, but then the more detailed, granular decision-making we do here, now we can start to define what the path forward is and what the strategy is in the longer term. And by the way, too, in the bottom right corner, this is a risk mitigation framework that is probably impossible to read. I can't read that even standing up here, so I don't expect you to. But it's a risk management framework. We're happy to share it with you if you'd like. But there's 13 different areas and lenses that we analyze risk from throughout a digital transformation. And as part of this decision-making process, that's part of what we're starting to do, too, is identify what the risks are that we've just identified. And again, this gets back to that love and logic thing or example I was giving you earlier, which is now we're putting it on the table of the executives to say, we're not here to say whether or not this path is right or wrong, but we are here to say, here are the strengths and here are the risks of this path that we've just chosen. And that's where you get into the whole negotiation process of, yeah, but can't we just do that without the risk? And we say, no, that's just an inherent risk within what you're doing. It's not a bad thing, it's just a risk, and now we've got to figure out how we're going to mitigate it. And so understanding those risks on the bottom right here becomes a really important input into the overall implementation planning and implementation readiness process that we talk about next.
This internal discovery too is really illuminating for the organization, right? You find out exactly where you're going, where you've been. Logan, I'm going to pick on you a little bit because you've just taken your organization through a large part of this, but also documenting it, having some artifacts that support this, reminds everybody all the way through exactly what you agreed to when you were going through these workshops.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that keynote presentation from my recent visit to Europe. Actually, it's the last time I was in Europe prior to the visit I'm making right now in the Netherlands. That presentation, by the way, was hosted in just outside of London in the UK with some of our European team there as well. So as well as our European clients, of course. So if you're in Europe, we certainly have a team and an office that can support you in your transformation initiatives, as well as if you're in Asia Pacific, we have offices in Australia and Hong Kong. And we also are headquartered in the United States to support our clients in the Americas. So please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me as well if you'd like to learn more about our services and how we can help you through your digital transformation to be more successful. So I hope that keynote, though, gave you some good guidance and some ideas on how the future of digital technologies and digital transformation is unfolding and how it might continue to unfold in the future. Love to hear your feedback, though, in the comments. What do you think about the future of digital transformation? What are some of the big trends you're seeing? I'd love to see your feedback and comments in the fields below or in the chat fields here. And we'll keep an eye on those and perhaps even pull some of those questions or comments into future episodes of this podcast. So thank you for being here this week. Really appreciate your time. Again, new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. If you'd like to be a sponsor on this podcast, you can reach out to majortom-productions.com. So be sure to contact us there. Actually, contact at majortom-productions.com. You can also reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with the right person over at the Major Tom team if you're looking for sponsorship opportunities here on this podcast, as well as some of our other podcast assets that we publish regularly as well. So as well as our YouTube channel, in-person events, et cetera. So thank you again for being here. I hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week for episode 162 of Transformation Ground Control. Thank you and take care.